The ice storms of Viral 9 hit without warning, and scout pilot Mitchell Rain learned this the hard way as his reconnaissance vessel spiraled through the moon's chaotic atmosphere. Warning lights blazed across his console like angry stars, each one screaming a different kind of death. Hull breach, engine failure, navigation offline. The ship bucked and rolled as super-cooled winds tore at its failing shields. Mitchell's hands flew across the control's muscle memory, taking over where conscious thought had frozen. He'd survived 3 tours in the outer colonies, but nothing had prepared him for this. The ice moon's gravitational anomalies played havoc with his instruments, pulling his ship into an erratic dance toward the surface below. "Come on, you piece of junk," he muttered, wrestling with the steering yoke. The ship groaned like a wounded animal, its hull already beginning to crack under the pressure. Through the viewport, he could see the surface rushing up a landscape of jagged ice formations and strange organic-looking structures that defied explanation. The crash came with a sound like the universe tearing in half. Metal screamed against ice sparks, flew like dying fireflies, and then everything went blessedly, terrifyingly silent. Mitchell awoke to warmth. Not the artificial heat of life support systems, but something organic, alive, enveloping. His eyes opened to a world that shouldn't exist, a cavernous space, lit by bioluminescent veins, running through what appeared to be living walls. The air smelled of damp earth and something floral, almost intoxicating in its sweetness. He tried to sit up, but something held him down. Not restraints, something softer, warmer. Looking down, he discovered his body wrapped in what looked like the most luxurious fur he'd ever seen, white as fresh snow, but with an almost ethereal quality that seemed to shift and shimmer in the strange light. "You wake Nest Prize." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, melodic, but alien, speaking in perfect English that somehow sounded wrong in all the right ways. Mitchell's head snapped toward the source, and his breath caught in his throat. She stood perhaps 7 feet tall, her form humanoid, but distinctly not human. White fur covered her body in patterns that seemed almost artistic, flowing over curves that spoke of strength and grace in equal measure. Her face was elongated, elegant, with large, luminous eyes that held an intelligence that was clearly non-human, yet undeniably aware. 2 sets of arms emerged from her torso, the upper pair more human-like, the lower pair ending in hands that were decidedly more bestial, adapted for purposes Mitchell couldn't begin to guess. "Where am I?" Mitchell's voice came out as a croak. His throat felt dry, scratchy, like he'd been breathing recycled air for days. Safe, warm, protected. She moved closer, her movements fluid, predatory, yet somehow reassuring. "You are in the nest home of the Rhianese, deep within the heart tree of our dwelling place. I am Ryona of the 7th matron line, and you are my nest prize." Nest prize. Mitchell struggled again this time, managing to sit partially upright. The fur around him seemed to respond to his movement, adjusting itself to maintain his comfort. "I'm not a prize. I'm a human being, a pilot. My name is Mitchell Rain, scout pilot for the Terran Expeditionary Force." Riona's head tilted in a gesture that seemed universal for curiosity, though her expression remained unreadable. "These words you speak, human pilot Terran. They translate but carry no meaning. You are warm blood, yes. You breathe, yes. You are found broken from the sky metal shell, yes." She gestured with one of her upper hands toward what Mitchell now realized was a corner of the cave, filled with twisted debris from his ship. "Therefore you are nest prize. Mine to tend, mine to protect, mine to—" She paused, her large eyes blinking slowly. "Groom." The word groom sent an uncomfortable shiver down Mitchell's spine. "Look, I appreciate the rescue, but I'm not anyone's prize. I need to contact my team, let them know I'm alive. They'll be worried." Team. Riona's lower hands moved to touch something at her belt, a device that looked organic, yet technological, like crystallized tree sap, with circuitry running through it. The translation matrix struggles with this concept. You speak of pack hive group. My squadron. Other humans. People like me. Mitchell tried to stand, but found his legs unsteady. How long had he been unconscious? Days, weeks. They'll come looking for me. A sound that might have been laughter rippled through Riona's throat, though it held no malice. The Sky Metal Bringers, yes. We have seen their searchlights crossing the ice fields. But the storm's rage and the deep cold claims many. They will not reach the heart tree. Mitchell's blood ran cold. They're out there. My team is out there looking for me. Were. Riona's correction was gentle but firm. The last searchlight dimmed 3 cycles of the ice moons ago. They have returned to their sky-dwelling place. 3 cycles. Mitchell had no idea how long that was in Earth time, but the implication hit him like a physical blow. His squadron had written him off as dead. Standard protocol for missing personnel in hostile environments: search for a reasonable period, then assume the worst and move on. He was stranded. However, Riona continued seeming to sense his distress. This brings no sadness to the nest prize. You are safe here, warm, here tended here. The cold cannot touch you. The hunger cannot claim you. The loneliness cannot— I'm not your nest prize! Mitchell's shout echoed off the organic walls, causing some of the bioluminescent veins to pulse brighter, as if responding to his emotional state. I'm a person, not a pet. Riona's 4 hands moved in a complex gesture that conveyed confusion, perhaps even hurt. Pet, this word. She touched her translation device again. Small creature kept for amusement. No. Nest prize is honored, cherished, protected. You misunderstand the sacred bond. Sacred bond. Mitchell struggled to his feet, the luxurious fur falling away, to reveal that someone, presumably Riona, had clothed him in garments that were clearly alien in origin. They were surprisingly well-fitted, made from materials that felt like silk, but had the durability of modern synthetics. I never agreed to any bond. Agreement. Riona's head tilted again, this time, in the opposite direction. The deep cold brought you broken to my hunting ground. The heart tree accepted your presence. I brought you to warmth and healing. The bond exists because it must. Because without it, you would return to the cold death. Mitchell looked around the space more carefully. What he had initially taken for a cave was clearly much more complex. The walls curved in ways that suggested they were inside something living, or at least something that had once been living. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed slowly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat made visible. Strange alcoves held objects he couldn't identify, and the air had that peculiar quality of perfect climate control, despite the absence of any visible technology. This heart tree, he said slowly, it's alive, isn't it? For the first time since he'd awakened, Riona's expression shifted to something approaching approval. Yes, Nest Prize shows wisdom. The heart trees are the oldest structures of our people. They grow for millennia, shaping themselves to our needs as we shape ourselves to theirs. This one has sheltered my line for 30 generations. And you live inside it like parasites. Riona's fur seemed to bristle at that. We are partners. The heart tree provides shelter, warmth, food when the ice times grow long. We provide protection, guidance, purpose. When a heart tree grows old and ready for the next sleep, we help it transition. When a new heart tree begins to grow, we nurture it. She gestured to the walls around them. This tree chose to accept you. Rare honor for one knot of Rionese blood. Mitchell moved closer to one of the walls, reaching out to touch the strange surface. It was warm, slightly yielding, and he could swear he felt a pulse beneath his palm. It's incredible. The bioengineering alone must have taken— Engineering, Riona interrupted. No, growing, singing, bonding. The heart trees are not made Nest Prize. They are born, they live, they choose their families. The philosophical implications of what she was saying boggled Mitchell's mind, but he forced himself to focus on more immediate concerns. Riona, I need to understand something. This Nest Prize thing, What exactly does it mean to you? What do you expect from me? Riona's lower hands moved in what Mitchell was beginning to recognize as a nervous gesture. The nest prize is, how to translate, the chosen one who shares the warmth place, who accepts grooming and tending, who brings new thoughts, new perspectives to the Bond family, who... She paused, her ears flicking in a way that reminded Mitchell absurdly of a cat. Who may, if the bond deepens, share in the creation of new life. Oh, Mitchell felt heat rush to his face. Oh, that's what I thought you meant. Does this bring fear to the nest prize? It brings confusion, Mitchell said carefully. Where I come from, relationships aren't decided by one person. They're mutual choices. Both parties have to agree. Both parties. Riona's confusion seemed genuine. But the bond already exists. You live in my nest space. You wear the fur gift I have prepared. You accept the warming and the food. How can the bond not be? Mitchell realized he was dealing with a fundamental cultural divide that went far beyond simple language barriers. Let me try to explain. In human culture, romantic relationships, bonds as you call them, are based on mutual affection, respect, and choice. Both people have to actively decide they want to be together. But you are here, Riona said simply. If you did not wish the bond, why would you remain? Because I don't have a choice. Mitchell gestured toward the exit, or what he assumed was an exit, a sphincter-like opening sealed tight against the outside environment. You said yourself that there are storms out there, that it's deadly cold. I'm staying because the alternative is death, not because I want to be your mate. Riona's fur darkened visibly, color draining until her white coat appeared almost gray. When she spoke, her voice carried a note of something that sounded suspiciously like hurt. The nest prize finds the bond distasteful. No, Mitchell said quickly, then caught himself. I mean, yes. No, it's complicated. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to find the right words. You seem like a good person, entity, being. But I don't know you. We don't even understand each other's basic concepts of relationships. How can there be a bond when we don't even speak the same emotional language? Riona was quiet for a long moment, her large eyes studying his face with an intensity that made Mitchell uncomfortable. Finally, she spoke. The nest prize wishes to understand the bond before accepting the bond. Yes, exactly. This is possible. Unusual, but possible. She moved to one of the alcoves and retrieved what looked like a bowl made from the same crystalline organic material as her translation device. It was filled with some kind of soup that smelled surprisingly appetizing. Then the nest prize will learn. I will teach the Rionese way of bonding, and the nest prize will teach the human way. We will find understanding. Mitchell accepted the bowl gratefully, realizing suddenly how hungry he was. The soup was delicious, rich, warming with flavors he couldn't identify, but that somehow felt familiar. And in the meantime, what am I to you? What's my status here? You are nest prize, Riona said simply. This does not change. But perhaps the bond can grow, rather than simply exist. She settled herself on what appeared to be a living piece of furniture that molded itself to her form. I will show you the ways of maintaining the nest. You will help with the small tasks that keep the heart tree healthy. In return, the heart tree provides for both of us. Like roommates, Mitchell mused, then had to explain the concept when Riona's translation device failed to parse it. Roommates, she repeated carefully. Yes, this is possible, though the nest prize will still require grooming. Grooming. Riona's fur brightened again, returning to its natural white. The maintenance of health and cleanliness, the untangling of hair fur, the soothing of tense muscles, the sharing of warmth during the deep cold periods. She gestured with one of her upper hands. The nest prize's fur is strange, short, sparse, inadequate for temperature regulation. Clearly, intensive grooming is required. Mitchell, looked down at his own arms, seeing his normal human hair through alien eyes. I think I understand better now. It's like caretaking. Caretaking. Riona tasted the word. Yes, this translates well. I am responsible for the Nest Prize's welfare. It is my honor and my duty. Over the following days, or what Mitchell assumed were days in this place where no sun rose or set, he began to understand the intricate ecosystem that was the heart tree. It wasn't just a dwelling. It was a living organism that had formed a symbiotic relationship with the Rianese. The tree provided shelter, warmth, and even food in the form of nutrient-rich saps and fruit-like growths. In return, the Rianese tended to its needs, groomed parasites from its inner bark, and sang to it an activity that Mitchell initially dismissed as ritual until he realized the songs had measurable effects on the tree's bioluminescence and temperature regulation. Riona proved to be a patient, if determined teacher. She showed him how to read the tree's moods in the patterns of its lights, how to help tend the small gardens of fungal crops that grew in specialized chambers, how to operate the organic technology that filtered air and water throughout the structure. In return, Mitchell shared what he could about human technology, though he quickly learned that the Rianese had little interest in artificial solutions to problems their bio-partnerships already solved. The grooming sessions, he had to admit, weren't as bad as he'd feared. Riona was surprisingly knowledgeable about human physiology, and her 4 hands made the process incredibly thorough. She could massage tension from his shoulders with her upper hands, while her lower hands worked on any scrapes or bruises, with what appeared to be a healing salve that promoted rapid cell regeneration. The experience was oddly relaxing, though Mitchell had to constantly remind himself not to read more into it than was there. "Where did you learn so much about human anatomy?" he asked during one such session. "We have encountered your kind before," Riona replied, her upper hands working on a particularly stubborn knot in his neck muscles. "Not often, but enough to learn. Most do not survive long enough for proper study." "Cheerful," Mitchell muttered. "The Nest Prize is different, stronger, more adaptable." Her hands paused in their work. "The heart tree speaks of you favorably. This is rare for outsiders." Mitchell had been trying to understand the relationship between the Rianese and their heart trees, and this seemed like an opening. "Can you actually communicate with it?" "The tree, I mean." "Not in words as you understand them. But the tree expresses itself in many ways: the color and intensity of its light patterns, the warmth or coolness of its inner chambers, the types of fruits and saps it produces. A skilled tree tender learns to read these signals and respond appropriately." "And what is it saying about me?" Riona's hands resumed their work, but he could sense her choosing her words carefully. "It finds you interesting. Your presence has caused new growth in several chambers, and the light patterns in your sleeping alcove are unlike anything I have seen in generations of tending." Mitchell twisted to look at her. "Is that good or bad?" "It is unprecedented. The elders will want to meet with you soon, to determine what your presence means for our people." A chill ran down Mitchell's spine that had nothing to do with temperature. "Am I in some kind of danger?" "No," Riona said firmly. "You are under my protection. The bond protects. But—" She paused, her ears flicking nervously. "There are those who question whether an outsider should be granted such intimate access to the heart tree's inner chambers, who worry about what knowledge you might carry back to your people." "My people think I'm dead, remember?" "For now. But if you were to signal them, if they were to find this place—" Riona's hands stilled completely. "The Rianese have remained hidden from the rest of the galaxy for good reason, Nest Prize. We are not warriors. We are gardeners, tenders, partners with living things that others would see only as resources to be exploited." The implication hit Mitchell like a physical blow. "You're afraid of us, of humans." "Not afraid. Cautious. Your people have a reputation for taking what they want when they want it. We have heard stories from other worlds, other species that have encountered human expansion." Riona's voice carried a sadness that seemed to age her before his eyes. "We do not wish to become another resource to be harvested." Mitchell thought about his squadron's mission, about the surveys they'd been conducting on ice-rich moons throughout this system. Officially, they were looking for water sources for future colonies. Unofficially, everyone knew they were also scouting for anything else that might be valuable minerals, energy sources, biological resources. The heart trees alone would be worth a fortune to biotech companies looking for new models of organic architecture. "I won't tell them," he said quietly. "When I get back, if I get back, I won't tell them about this place." Riona's hands came to rest on his shoulders, her grip gentle but firm. "The Nest Prize speaks with certainty about events that have not yet occurred. How can you promise what you have not yet chosen?" "Because it's the right thing to do. Because you saved my life. Because—" he struggled to find the words. "Because this place is beautiful. Your people are unique. The galaxy doesn't need another strip mine." For the first time since he'd known her, Riona's expression was completely readable surprise, followed by something that might have been hope. "The Nest Prize continues to exceed expectations." Their conversation was interrupted by a low, resonant sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Riona's head snapped up, her ears twitching. "What is that?" "A summoning. One of the elders calls for assembly." She stood, her movements suddenly all business. "The Nest Prize will come. It is time you met the matron." Riona led him through passages he hadn't seen before, deeper into the heart tree's structure. The organic corridors branched and divided like blood vessels, each path unique in its bioluminescent patterns and subtle architecture. Sometimes they walked through tunnels just large enough for them to pass single file. Other times they emerged into vast chambers that could have held his crashed ship with room to spare. "The heart tree is like a city," Mitchell observed. "Larger than most cities," Riona agreed. "This particular tree has been growing for over 3,000 years. Its root system extends for kilometers beneath the ice, tapping into geothermal vents that provide energy and warmth. The main body supports nearly 200 nest families." 200 families. How many Ryanese live here? "In this heart tree, perhaps 1,500. There are other heart trees scattered across Viral 9, some larger, some smaller, some still young and learning their purpose." Riona's voice carried a note of pride. "We are not a numerous people, but we are stable, content. We grow slowly but surely, like the trees themselves." They emerged into what was clearly a ceremonial space. The chamber was enormous, its ceiling lost in darkness high above. The walls curved in a perfect circle, lined with alcoves, where figures sat in silent meditation. At the center of the space, a raised dais grew from the floor itself, its surface covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as Mitchell watched. "The assembly chamber," Riona whispered, "where the matrons meet to decide matters affecting the entire heart tree." Figures began to emerge from the alcoves, other Rionese, each one unique in their fur patterns and subtle physical differences, but all sharing the same basic form as Riona. They moved with a fluid grace that would have been beautiful to watch if Mitchell hadn't been acutely aware that he was the center of attention. "So many," he murmured. "Only the senior tree tenders and nest mothers of each line," Riona replied. "You are being given a great honor, Nest Prize." "I'm beginning to think honor means something different in your culture than in mine." Riona started to reply, but the resonant sound came again, louder this time, vibrating through the living floor itself. From the center of the dais, a section of the surface began to rise, forming itself into a throne-like structure. A figure approached from the far side of the chamber, taller than Riona, older, her white fur marked with intricate patterns of silver that spoke of advanced age. "Matron Kira," Riona whispered, dropping into what was clearly a formal bow. "Senior mother of the 7th line, eldest tender of this heart tree." Mitchell wasn't sure of the protocol, but he attempted his own bow, which drew murmurs from the assembled Ryanese that he couldn't interpret. Matron Kira settled herself on the living throne, her four hands resting in a complex pattern across its surface. When she spoke, her voice carried an authority that needed no translation device to understand. Riona of the seventh line, you have brought before the assembly a being not of our world, not of our blood, not of our understanding. Yet you claim bond right over this creature. Explain this claim. Mitchell bristled at being referred to as a creature, but forced himself to remain silent. This was clearly a formal proceeding with rules he didn't understand. Riona stepped forward, her posture straight and proud. Honored matron, I found this being broken and dying in the ice fields during my ritual hunt. The cold death had nearly claimed him when I discovered the wreckage of his sky vessel. I brought him to my nest as is right and proper for a prey thing in distress. Prey thing! Matron Kira's ears flicked forward. You claim this being as prey? No, honored matron. I claim bond right as nest prize. A ripple of surprised murmurs ran through the assembly. Matron Kira's expression didn't change, but her tail, which Mitchell hadn't noticed before, twitched in what seemed like agitation. Nest prize. You claim full bond right over a creature whose nature we do not know, whose purpose we cannot understand, whose very presence may bring danger to the heart tree. With respect, honored matron. Riona's voice carried a slight edge. The heart tree has already accepted him. New growth has appeared in chambers where he rests. The light patterns respond to his presence in ways not seen since the early days of the bonding. This caused a sensation among the assembled Rionese. Several rose to their feet, their voices raised in what sounded like heated debate in their own language. Matron Kira raised one hand, and silence fell instantly. The nest prize will speak for himself, she declared, her large eyes fixing on Mitchell with an intensity that made him want to squirm. Being of the sky vessels, you understand our words. Mitchell stepped forward, grateful that his voice came out steady. I do, honored matron. Your translation technology is remarkably sophisticated. Technology, Matron Kira, seemed to taste the word like something bitter. Your people think in terms of technology. We think in terms of partnership. What do you call yourself? My name is Mitchell Rain, scout pilot for the Terran Expeditionary Force. I was part of a mission to survey this moon for potential resources. Another ripple of agitation went through the assembly, but Matron Kira's expression remained unchanged. Resources. What kind of resources? Mitchell felt the weight of everyone's attention pressing down on him. How much truth was too much? How much could he reveal without making things worse? Water primarily. Ice that could be harvested for space stations and colony ships. Also, general surveys for minerals, energy sources, anything that might be useful. Useful. Matron Kira's repetition of the word carried a wealth of implication. And what would your people consider our heart trees useful? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Mitchell could feel Riona's tension beside him, could sense the growing hostility from the assembled Rionese. He thought of the biotech companies back on Earth, of the billions of credits that advanced bioarchitectural systems like the heart trees would be worth. Yes, he said finally. They would find them very useful indeed. Chaos erupted. Several Rionese were on their feet, voices raised in anger and fear. Someone shouted something in their own language that made Riona step protectively in front of Mitchell. Through it all, Matron Kira remained seated, watching, evaluating. Silence. The word came not from Matron Kira, but from another figure emerging from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. This Rionese was different, younger than the matron, but carrying herself with unmistakable authority. Her fur was a darker shade, marked with patterns that seemed to shift and move in the chamber's light. Vayli of the third line speaks out of turn, Matron Kira observed mildly, but there was steel beneath her words. I speak when the safety of the heart tree is threatened. Vayli strode into the center of the chamber, her four hands clenched into fists. This creature admits his people would exploit us, harvest us, turn our partners into resources. And yet Riona claims bond right. This is madness. The Nest Prize speaks truth when lies would serve him better, Riona shot back. This shows honor, not threat. Honor from a Sky Raider. From one of the cold machines that strip life from worlds. Vayli's fur was literally standing on end, now making her appear larger, more threatening. You risk everything for your foolish attachment to this alien creature. Enough! Matron Kira rose from her throne, and the living dais responded by spreading outward, giving her more space to move. Vayli of the third line, you challenge the bond right of Riona of the seventh line. I do, honored matron. I claim this. This creature is a threat to the heart tree and all who dwell within it. I demand the right of challenge. Mitchell had no idea what a right of challenge entailed, but Riona's sharp intake of breath suggested it wasn't good. Honored matron, she began, but Vayli cut her off. I claim combat right. Let the tree spirits judge whether this bond serves the greater good. Combat right, Mitchell stepped forward. Wait, nobody's fighting anybody. This is ridiculous. I'm not worth... The Nest Prize does not understand, Riona said firmly, her hand catching his arm. Combat right is ancient law. When two nest mothers cannot agree on matters affecting the heart tree, the spirits of the tree itself will guide the outcome of single combat. You're going to fight over me. Mitchell looked between Riona and Vayli, noting the obvious physical differences. Vayli was larger, her build, more obviously muscular, and she carried herself like someone who knew how to use violence effectively. Riona, you don't have to. I accept the challenge. Riona's voice cut across his protest clear and strong. Vayli of the third line questions my judgment and my bond right. I will prove both before the spirits of the heart tree. Matron Kira studied them both for a long moment. The challenge is accepted. Combat will commence at the next deep cycle in the spirit grove. The tree itself will judge the righteousness of your claims. 3 days, Riona said quietly, as the assembly began to disperse. I have 3 days to prepare. 3 days to teach me enough about your fighting style so I can help, Mitchell corrected. Riona turned to him, her expression unreadable. The Nest Prize does not understand. This combat is mine alone to face. Such is the law of challenge. And if you lose, then Vayli will have the right to decide your fate. She began walking toward the exit passages, Mitchell hurrying to keep up. But I will not lose. Riona, wait. Mitchell caught her arm, surprised by how warm and solid she felt beneath the fur. Why are you doing this? Really, I'm just some stranger who crashed into your life. You don't owe me anything. She stopped walking and turned to face him fully. In the shifting light of the corridor, her eyes seemed to glow with an inner fire. The Nest Prize asks why I defend what is mine. But I'm not yours. That's what I've been trying to tell you. In human culture. In Ryanese culture, the heart tree speaks truth through growth and light. When you first entered my nest, the walls bloomed with new patterns. When you sleep, the air grows sweeter. When you tend the small gardens, the plants reach toward you, as they reach toward the sun cycles. She reached out with one of her upper hands, touching his cheek, with a gentleness that made his breath catch. The heart tree declares you worthy. How can I do less? Over the next 3 days, Mitchell learned more about Ryanese society than he had in all his previous time in the heart tree. Riona spent hours each day in preparation, not just physical training, but ritual purification meditation, and something she called tree communion, long periods, where she would press her hands against the walls of different chambers. Her eyes closed, her breathing deep and slow. Mitchell used his time to explore areas of the heart tree he hadn't seen before, accompanied by various Ryanese who seemed curious about him, despite, or perhaps because of the controversy his presence had created. He learned that the heart trees were more than just dwellings. They were the foundation of Ryanese civilization partners in the truest sense. Each tree was unique, with its own personality preferences and abilities. Some were better at producing certain types of food, others at maintaining comfortable environments. Still others at growing specialized chambers for specific crafts or purposes. It's like they're domesticated, he mused to one of his guides, a young Ryanese named Thalen, who served as a sort of apprentice tree tender. Domesticated. Thalen's translation device struggled with the concept. What is this word? Changed from their wild state through artificial selection, modified to serve human purposes. Even as Mitchell said it, he realized how poorly the concept applied to what he was seeing. Ah, no. Not domesticated. Partners. The heart trees chose us as much as we chose them. They needed Tender's guardian's purpose. We needed shelter, sustenance, beauty. Together we create something neither could achieve alone. But your ancestors must have originally been something else. Before the heart trees, how did the Ryanese live? Thalen's ears drooped slightly. The old stories speak of the time of ice death when our people wandered the frozen wastes, dying slowly from cold and hunger. The first heart tree was found by the first mother Syriana, who heard it calling through the ice storms. She followed the song to its source and found a young tree barely begun struggling to grow in the hostile environment. And she helped it. She gave it purpose. The tree needed a reason to grow something to nurture and protect. Syriana offered herself and her small band of followers as partners. The tree grew strong, and they survived the worst winter in our history. When spring came, the tree had changed them as much as they had changed it. Changed them how? Thalen gestured to himself, his forearms spreading wide. We were not always as we are now. The bonding with the heart trees shaped us over generations, gave us the forms we needed to tend them properly. In return, we gained longevity, resistance to cold, the ability to commune with living systems. He paused, his young face serious. The heart trees made us what we were meant to be. Mitchell spent that evening in deep thought, sitting in the alcove of his chamber, while bioluminescent patterns pulsed slowly around him. The more he learned about the Ryanese, the more he understood why they were so protective of their way of life. This wasn't just a civilization, it was a symbiosis. Millions of years in the making, a perfect balance between two different forms of life that had created something greater than either could be alone. His contemplation was interrupted by Riona's return. She looked tired, but determined, her fur freshly groomed and marked with what appeared to be ceremonial paint in intricate patterns. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Prepared. She settled beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her body. The tree spirits have shown me what I need to know. Which is that some bonds are worth fighting for, regardless of the cost. She turned to look at him, her large eyes reflecting the bioluminescent patterns on the walls. The Nest Prize still does not understand why I do this. I'm beginning to. Mitchell found himself reaching out his fingers, running through the soft fur of her upper arm. You're not just fighting for me, are you? You're fighting for the principle of the thing. For the right to choose your own bonds, your own destiny. The Nest Prize grows wise. She leaned into his touch, a sound that might have been purring rumbling in her throat. Veli, and those who think like her, believe the heart tree is all that individual desires, must be subsumed for the good of the community. She would preserve us by cutting us off from anything new, anything different. And you believe differently. I believe the heart tree wants us to grow, to change, to become more than we were. Your presence has proven that. The tree responds to you in ways it has never responded to any outsider. She caught his hand in one of hers, her grip firm and warm. But the cost of proving this will be high if I fail. What exactly will happen to me if you lose? Riona was quiet for a long moment. Veli will have the right to determine your fate. She could order you cast out into the ice storms. She could have you taken far from the heart tree and left in the wilderness. Or, she paused, clearly reluctant to continue. Or she could order your death. The right of challenge includes the right of final judgment. Mitchell felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. And you're willing to risk your life to prevent that? I would risk more than my life. Riona's voice was firm, carrying the weight of absolute conviction. But I will not lose. The day of the combat arrived with little fanfare. Mitchell woke to find Riona already gone, participating in some final ritual preparation. Thalon appeared at his alcove shortly after carrying what appeared to be formal clothing, a garment similar to what he'd been wearing but more elaborately decorated. For the ceremony, Thalon explained, the nest prize must be properly attired. I'm not just going to watch him, All parties to the challenge must be present. You, as the subject of the dispute, will stand witness. Mitchell, dressed in the formal garment, surprised by how well it fit, and how comfortable it was despite its elaborate decoration. The material seemed to regulate temperature, automatically keeping him perfectly comfortable, as Thalon led him through unfamiliar passages toward what he called the Spirit Grove. The Spirit Grove turned out to be another enormous chamber, but this one was different from any he'd seen before. Instead of smooth, curved walls, this space was filled with what could only be described as pillars, massive columns that grew from floor to ceiling, each one twisted and gnarled like tree trunks. Bioluminescent patterns covered every surface, pulsing in complex rhythms that seemed almost like music made visible. The Rianese had already gathered, filling terraced alcoves that ringed the space. At the center, a circular area, perhaps 30 meters across, had been left clear. The floor here was different too, not the smooth living surface of other chambers, but something rougher, more organic, covered in a moss-like growth that seemed to respond to footsteps with subtle changes in color. Matron Kira stood at the edge of the circle, resplendent in ceremonial robes that seemed to be made from the same bioluminescent material as the walls. She raised her hands, and the murmur of conversation died away. We gather to witness the resolution of a challenge right, her voice carried clearly throughout the space. Riona of the 7th line claims bond right over the sky, being known as Mitchell Rain. Vayli of the 3rd line challenges this claim, stating that the outsider's presence threatens the heart tree and all who dwell within it. Riona entered the circle from one side, and Mitchell's breath caught. She wore no ceremonial robes, no elaborate decorations. Instead, she appeared in her natural state, her white fur gleaming in the chamber's light, marked only with the painted symbols she'd worn the night before. She carried no weapons that Mitchell could see, relying instead on her natural claws and the obvious strength in her forearms. From the opposite side of the circle, Vayli made her entrance. She too had eschewed ceremonial dress, but where Riona appeared elegant and graceful, Vayli looked like a force of nature. Her darker fur was marked with scars that spoke of previous battles, and her movements carried a predatory fluidity that made it clear she was comfortable with violence. The heart tree will judge, Matron Kira intoned. Let the spirits guide the outcome of this combat. Let truth be revealed through strength. Let wisdom emerge from struggle. She stepped back, leaving the two combatants alone in the circle. They faced each other just outside arm's reach, and for a moment the chamber was so quiet, Mitchell could hear his own heartbeat. Last chance to yield, Riona of the 7th line, Vayli said, her voice carrying clearly in the silence. Abandon this foolish claim to the outsider, and we can settle this without bloodshed. The bond is sacred, Riona replied, her voice steady and strong. I will not yield what is mine by right. Then you will fall by right. The combat began with an explosion of movement. Vayli lunged forward, her forearms moving in a complex pattern that would have overwhelmed most opponents. But Riona was ready, ducking under the first strike, and using her smaller size to her advantage, dodging around Vayli's bulk, while landing quick strikes with her claws. It quickly became clear that this wasn't just a simple brawl. The combat had rules, patterns, almost like a deadly dance. Each combatant seemed to be testing the other, probing for weaknesses, while defending against counterattacks. The Rianese audience watched in complete silence, their attention absolute. Vayli pressed her advantage, using her superior reach and strength to drive Riona back toward the edge of the circle. But when it seemed she might be forced out, Riona suddenly reversed direction, slipping inside Vayli's guard and landing a series of rapid strikes that drew first blood-thin scratches across Vayli's torso that welled with dark liquid. The sight of blood seemed to change something in both combatants. The pace increased, the strikes becoming harder, more focused. Vayli's claws caught Riona across the shoulder, tearing through fur and flesh. Riona responded with a move that seemed impossible, using all four arms in concert to briefly lift Vayli off her feet and slam her into the moss-covered ground. Mitchell wanted to look away, wanted to stop this insane fight that was happening because of him, but he found himself unable to move. This wasn't just combat, it was ritual ceremony, a test of something deeper than physical strength. As the fight progressed, the bioluminescent patterns in the chamber began to change. The pillars pulsed brighter, and the moss beneath the combatants' feet started to glow where their blood fell. The heart tree itself was responding to what was happening, expressing itself through light and color. Vayli landed a solid hit that sent Riona tumbling across the circle, coming to rest dangerously close to the edge. For a moment, she lay still, and Mitchell's heart nearly stopped. But then, she rolled aside just as Vayli's claws raked the ground where her head had been. "Yield," Vayli snarled, her darker fur now marked with patches of bright blood. "You cannot win this, Riona. Accept defeat with honor." Instead of responding with words, Riona launched herself back into the fight with renewed fury. But something had changed. Her movements were different now, more fluid, more in harmony with the environment around her. When she moved, the moss glowed brighter beneath her feet. When she struck, sparks of bioluminescent energy seemed to trail from her claws. Mitchell watched in amazement as Riona seemed to dance with the chamber itself, using the environment to her advantage in ways that went beyond ordinary tactical thinking. She wasn't just fighting Vayli anymore. She was fighting with the heart tree, channeling its power through herself. Vayli noticed the change too, her eyes widening in something approaching fear. "What are you doing?" "What I was meant to do," Riona replied, her voice carrying new harmonics, as if she were speaking not just for herself, but for something larger. "What the tree spirits have shown me." The final exchange came with startling suddenness. Vayli, perhaps panicked by the supernatural turn the combat had taken, made a desperate lunge with all four arms extended. It should have been an overwhelming attack, impossible to counter. But Riona simply wasn't there. She moved like liquid flowing around the attack, and when she reappeared behind Vayli, her claws were at her opponent's throat. "Do you yield?" Riona's voice was gentle, almost sad. Vayli's whole body slumped in defeat. "I yield. The tree has spoken." The chamber erupted in a sound unlike anything Mitchell had heard before. Not quite cheering, not quite singing, but something that resonated through the organic structure itself. The bioluminescent patterns blazed so brightly, the chamber was bathed in ethereal light, and Mitchell could swear he felt the floor vibrating beneath his feet. Matron Kira stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "The heart tree has judged. The tree spirits have spoken through the outcome of combat. Riona of the Seventh Line's claim to bond right is validated." She turned her gaze to Mitchell, and her next words carried the weight of law. "Mitchell Rain of the Sky Vessels, you are recognized as nest prize to Riona of the Seventh Line, with all rights and protections that bond entails. You are welcomed into the heart tree as family, as partner, as hope for something new." The last word seemed to surprise even her, as if it had come from somewhere beyond her conscious intention. Riona released Vayli and walked toward Mitchell, her movement still carrying that otherworldly grace. Blood matted her fur in several places, but her eyes were bright with triumph, and something else, joy perhaps, or relief. "It is done," she said simply. "The bond is recognized." Mitchell felt a complex rush of emotions, relief that the fight was over, gratitude that Riona had won, and something else he wasn't ready to name. "Are you hurt?" "Nothing that will not heal." She reached out with one of her upper hands, touching his face with infinite gentleness. "The nest prize is truly mine now, by right of combat, by judgment of the tree spirits, by consensus of the community. And if I still don't want to be anyone's prize..." Riona's expression shifted to something he'd never seen before, uncertainty mixed with hope. "Then perhaps Perhaps the nest prize can teach me what he would prefer to be called. What manner of bond he would choose to build, rather than simply accept. Before Mitchell could respond, Vayli approached them. Up close, her wounds looked serious but not life-threatening. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of formal declaration. Riona of the 7th line. I acknowledge your victory and the judgment of the heart tree. Your bond right is beyond question. She turned to Mitchell, her expression difficult to read. Sky being, I have wronged you with my assumptions and my fear. You have proven yourself worthy through the courage of your bondmate and the acceptance of the tree spirits. Thank you, Mitchell said, not sure what else to say. But know this, your presence here remains dangerous, not because of who you are, but because of what your people might do if they knew of us. The heart tree may have accepted you, but the wider galaxy. She shook her head. That is a challenge for another day. As the crowd began to disperse, Matron Kira approached them. Riona, take your nest prize to the healing chambers. Both of you have much recovery ahead of you. Honored Matron, Riona began, but Kira held up a hand. The tree has shown us something important today. Your bondmate brought change to our light patterns, but your combat brought something more, a new kind of tree song, a harmony we have not heard before. She gazed at Mitchell with those ancient wise eyes. Perhaps it is time for the Rianese to think beyond mere preservation of what was toward cultivation of what might be. Over the following days, as Riona healed, and they both adjusted to the new reality of their recognized bond, Mitchell began to understand what Matron Kira had meant. His presence wasn't just tolerated. Now, it was actively celebrated. Rianese, who had been distant or suspicious before, began approaching him with curiosity, sharing their knowledge, asking about his world. Most importantly, he began to understand his own feelings. Somewhere during the crisis of the challenge, during the fear of possibly losing Riona forever, he had realized that the bond she claimed wasn't just one-sided. He had grown to care for her, not just as a savior or protector, but as a person, a partner. I think I'm starting to understand what you meant about bonds, he told her one evening, as they sat together in their nest chamber, watching the bioluminescent patterns shift around them. Oh, she was grooming his hair, something that had initially annoyed him, but that he'd come to find deeply relaxing. They're not just about possession or obligation. They're about choosing to build something together that neither could create alone. Riona's hands paused in their work. The nest prize speaks wisdom. Is this the kind of bond he would choose? Mitchell turned to face her, fully seeing his own reflection in her large, luminous eyes. With you, yes, I think it is. That night, for the first time since arriving on Viral 9, Mitchell fell asleep not as a crashed pilot waiting for rescue, but as someone who had found something worth staying for. He woke to alarm. The heart tree's walls pulsed with a rhythm he'd never seen before, rapid, frantic, urgent. Riona was already on her feet, her ears twitching as she listened to sounds too subtle for Mitchell to detect. What's wrong? The deep sensors detect movement on the ice fields, large mechanical. Her expression was grim. Sky vessels approach. Mitchell's blood ran cold. My people, they've come back. More than yours, I think. The patterns suggest multiple vessels, large formation. She moved to one of the chamber's communication nodes, pressing her hands against the organic surface. After a moment, she straightened. Matron Kira summons us. The human sky fleet threatens the outer groves. They hurried through passages that seemed more alive than ever, the walls pulsing with urgent bioluminescence. Other Rianese moved with purpose, around them carrying out tasks Mitchell didn't understand, but that clearly related to the approaching threat. The assembly chamber they arrived at was very different from the serene space where the challenge had been held. Now, it crackled with energy and tension-filled, with Rianese moving with military precision. Holographic displays, or what served the Rianese for the same purpose, showed aerial views of the ice fields around the heart tree. Mitchell Rain of the Sky Vessels. Matron Kira's voice cut through the noise. Your people have returned, in force. The displays showed what looked like a full fleet, not just his squadron's reconnaissance ships, but heavy cruisers, troop transports, and things he didn't recognize. But that looked ominous. They were arranged in a search pattern, systematically scanning the moon's surface. "I don't understand," Mitchell said, studying the formations. "That's way more firepower than a rescue mission would require." "Perhaps they seek more than rescue," Bailey suggested grimly. She had recovered from their combat, though she still bore the marks of their fight. "The deep scanners show energy signatures compatible with mining equipment," another Ryanese reported. "Earth-moving machines, extraction devices." "They're not here to rescue me," Mitchell realized with growing horror. "They're here to exploit whatever they find. My disappearance must have triggered a more thorough survey of the moon." "Can you contact them?" Matron Kira asked. "Convince them to leave?" Mitchell shook his head. "Even if I could reach them, I'm officially dead. My reappearance would just confirm there's something here worth investigating." "Then we must hide," Bailey said firmly. "Seal the groves go dormant until they leave." "For how long?" Riona challenged. "They have years to search. We have perhaps days of food in the emergency reserves if we fully seal the trees." "The deep sensors have detected drilling platforms being deployed," the technician reported. "They're not conducting a quick survey. They're preparing for extensive operations." Matron Kira stood in the center of the chamber, the weight of decision visible in every line of her body. "Mitchell Rain as bondmate to one of our own, you are one of us now. But you understand your people better than we do. What will they do when they find us?" Mitchell closed his eyes, thinking of corporate protocols of the biotech companies that would pay fortunes for access to the heart trees of the military commanders, who would see the Ryanese as either resources to exploit or obstacles to remove. "They'll want to study you," he said finally. "Your technology, your partnership with the trees, your biological adaptations. Some will be genuinely interested in learning, but others—" He opened his eyes, meeting the matron's gaze. "Others will see profit, in your bioarchitecture and your longevity treatments in the trees themselves. And when we refuse to share such things, they'll take them anyway or try to." A grim silence fell over the assembly. These were not a warlike people. They were gardeners, tenders, partners with living things. The idea of armed conflict went against everything their culture represented. "There is another option," a new voice said from the entrance to the chamber. Everyone turned to see an ancient Ryanese approaching, older than Matron Kira, her fur almost entirely silver, moving with the careful steps of great age. "Elder Nisara," Matron Kira said, bowing deeply, "you have left the deep meditation chambers." "The heart tree called me from my rest," the elder replied. Her voice carried the weight of centuries. "It speaks of a path we have not considered." She moved to the center of the chamber, the crowd parting before her. When she reached the holographic displays, she studied them for a long moment before speaking. "The Sky People seek resources. They believe in taking what they want." She turned to look at Mitchell. "But what if the resources came willingly? What if we offered trade instead of hiding?" "Trade," Bailey protested. "Our sacred bonds are not for trade." "Not the bonds themselves," Elder Nisara said patiently, "but the fruits of those bonds. We produce more than we need, foods that grow nowhere else, medicines that heal in ways their science cannot understand, materials that self-repair and adapt. We could offer these things in exchange for being left in peace." "They'll want more," Mitchell said quietly. "They always want more. Give them a taste and they'll want the source." "Then perhaps the source must make itself unattainable," the elder replied with a smile that seemed to hold secrets. Riona stepped forward. "Elder, are you suggesting the old protocols?" "The very old protocols. The ones not used since the first Sky People found our world 10,000 years ago." Matron Kira's expression shifted to something approaching awe. "The Great Recession!" Mitchell looked between them, confused. "What are you talking about?" "The heart trees can enter a state called the Great Recession," Riona explained. "It's like hibernation, but more complex. They withdraw from the surface, sealing all entrances, becoming dormant. To outside observation, they appear to be simple trees, nothing more. But the cost, Veli protested. The energy required, the time lost? Better than the cost of war, Elder Nisara replied firmly. And this time we will not be alone in the deep places. We will have our sky friend to help us understand when it is safe to return. All eyes turned to Mitchell. You want me to stay to monitor the situation while you're hibernating? The heart tree will maintain small chambers near the surface, the elder explained. Enough for 1 or 2 beings to survive comfortably. You would be our eyes and ears in the upper world, our intermediary with your people when necessary. And Riona will remain with her bondmate, of course. The tree accepts the bond, it will not separate what it has joined. Mitchell felt a mixture of fear and determination settling in his stomach. How long would this hibernation last? As long as necessary. Years, perhaps decades. The trees can sleep for centuries if needed. And what about my people? They'll expect some kind of explanation for their survey data. Elder Nisara smiled that mysterious smile again. Leave that to us. The heart trees have resources your people cannot imagine. The plan took shape over the next several hours. The approaching fleet had time to deploy and begin their initial surveys, but they moved with the methodical precision of a major operation. They weren't in any rush. This gave the Rianese time to prepare. Mitchell watched in amazement as the heart tree began its transformation. Chambers that had been open and accessible started to seal themselves, the walls growing together like healing wounds. The bioluminescent patterns dimmed to a barely perceptible glow, and the vibrant energy that had filled the space began to ebb away. Rianese moved through the passages in organized groups, carrying essential supplies to the deep chambers, where they would wait out the human occupation of their moon. Families said goodbye to their surface gardens. Tenders performed final rituals with the trees, and the life that had filled these spaces for millennia slowly withdrew into dormancy. It's like watching a city die, Mitchell murmured as he and Riona packed what few possessions they would take to their surface hideout. Not die, Riona corrected gently. Sleep, rest, dream of better times to come. Their farewell to Matron Kira took place in a nearly empty assembly chamber that had already begun to seal itself. Mitchell, Rain of the Sky Vessels, she said formally, I charge you with the protection of our people during the time of sleep. Be our voice, when voice is needed, our eyes, when sight is required, our judgment, when decisions must be made. I understand the responsibility, Mitchell replied. I won't let you down. And you, Riona of the 7th line, you choose freely to remain in the surface realm with your bondmate. I choose freely, Riona confirmed. The bond is stronger than the call of the deep chambers. Then may the tree spirits watch over you both. May you preserve what matters most until the time comes for awakening. The last thing they saw of the assembly chamber was the great organic doors growing shut, sealing the depths away from the surface world. Their hiding place was a marvel of biological engineering. Located just beneath the tree's bark, it appeared from outside to be nothing more than a natural hollow in an ancient tree trunk. Inside, however, it was a comfortable living space with everything needed for long-term occupation. The heart tree had grown this chamber specifically for their mission, shaping it to accommodate both Rianese and human physiology. Most importantly, it contained an array of sensory equipment that allowed them to monitor everything happening on the surface. Organic screens showed multiple views of the area around the tree, while acoustic amplifiers let them listen to human conversations from considerable distances. Look at this, Mitchell said, studying the displays. The human fleet had landed in force, setting up a massive base camp on the ice fields. Prefabricated structures were already going up, and teams of scientists and miners were spreading out across the landscape. They work quickly, Riona observed. Too quickly. This isn't a normal survey operation. Mitchell pointed to one of the screens, showing heavy machinery being unloaded. Those are industrial extractors designed for permanent mining operations. They're not here to study, they're here to harvest. Over the following days, they watched the humans systematically explore the area around the heart tree. Survey teams took samples of everything they could find, while others set up drilling platforms and atmospheric processors. To their credit, they showed remarkable care in documenting what they found, but Mitchell could see the underlying purpose in everything they did. "They're mapping resource deposits," he explained to Riona as they watched a geological survey team at work. "Looking for water ice mineral veins, anything that might be valuable. And when they find the heart trees, they'll be confused at first. The trees in hibernation look completely dormant, like they've been dead for centuries. But they'll take samples, run tests." Mitchell trailed off, watching as a survey team approached the nearest heart tree. Oh no. On the screen, they could see the humans setting up some kind of scanning equipment next to the slumbering tree. Energy readings spiked across their organic instruments as the human sensors probed the tree's root system. "They'll detect the subsurface structure," Mitchell said with growing alarm. "The tunnels, the deep chambers." "The tree knows," Riona said calmly. "Watch." As if responding to the human scans, the tree began to shift. Not visibly to the humans, it still appeared completely dormant. But their instruments showed what was really happening. The tree was redirecting its internal structure, closing off passages, creating false readings that would confuse the surface scans. "Incredible," Mitchell breathed. "It's actively deceiving their sensors." The human team spent hours trying to get consistent readings, but the tree's countermeasures were too sophisticated. Eventually, they marked the location for later investigation and moved on. "They think it's just interference from the mineral deposits," Mitchell said, listening to their radio chatter. "They have no idea they're being actively fooled." Days passed, then weeks. The human operation expanded, setting up permanent installations and beginning preliminary extraction operations on easier targets. Surface ice deposits, exposed mineral veins, things that wouldn't require extensive excavation. Mitchell monitored their communications, learning about the larger purpose of the mission. "It's not just about this moon," he told Riona during one of their evening meals. The heart tree provided food through specialized growths that appeared at regular intervals, nutritious, if somewhat alien in flavor. "They're establishing a major base here, a staging point for expansion into this whole system. Your people are very ambitious." That's one way to put it. Mitchell studied the displays showing the growing human settlement. "But there's something else. I've been listening to their scientific reports, and they're finding things they don't understand. Energy readings from deep underground atmospheric anomalies that suggest extensive biological activity, traces of advanced organic chemistry in the ice samples. The sleeping trees leave signs. Faint ones. Nothing that directly reveals what's here, but enough to make them curious." Mitchell turned to face her, his expression serious. "Riona, they know something is down there. They're planning a major excavation operation. Next month, according to their project timeline. They're bringing in specialized deep drilling equipment, seismic sensors, a whole array of detection gear." He gestured to the screens. "They're going to punch holes all through this area, mapping everything beneath the surface." Riona was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps it is time to wake the elder." "You can do that." "Not wake her fully. But the surface chambers can maintain communication with certain deep areas in times of crisis. This qualifies." She led him to a section of their hiding place he'd never seen before, a small alcove containing what looked like a shrine. The walls here were covered in intricate patterns that seemed to move and shift as he watched. Riona placed all four of her hands against different points on the wall, closing her eyes in concentration. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the patterns began to glow, brightening, until the alcove was filled with soft, pulsing light. A voice seemed to come from the walls themselves, Elder Nisara's voice, though distant and echoing, with an otherworldly quality. "Riona of the seventh line, you wake me from the deep dreaming. What emergency requires such effort?" Riona quickly explained the situation, the approaching excavation, the evidence that the humans suspected something lay beneath the surface, the growing certainty that the hibernating trees would eventually be discovered. I see. The elder's voice carried the weight of consideration. And what does our sky friend counsel? Mitchell stepped forward, feeling somewhat foolish, talking to a wall. Elder Nisara, my people are persistent. They won't stop digging until they find something significant. When they do find the heart trees, and they'll bring in xenobiologists, corporate representatives, probably military units to secure the site. And you believe this would be problematic? I believe it would be catastrophic for your people. The corporations would want to exploit the trees for profit. The military would see them as a potential threat or valuable asset. The scientists would want to study them, take samples, run experiments. Mitchell ran a hand through his hair, frustrated by the limitations of communicating through an organic communication system. There's no scenario where your people maintain control of their own destiny once this discovery is made public. Elder Nisara was silent for so long that Mitchell began to wonder if the connection had been lost. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a note of sad resignation. Then perhaps the time has come for the old protocols. What old protocols? Mitchell asked. Not the Great Recession, Riona whispered, her eyes wide with something approaching fear. Elder, surely you don't mean… The final protocol, the last gift of the heart trees. Elder Nisara's voice grew stronger, more certain. If our symbiosis is to end, let it end on our terms, not theirs. What are you talking about? Mitchell demanded. Riona turned to him, her expression stricken. The heart trees can choose to die. Not just hibernate, truly die. When they do, they release all their stored energy at once. It creates a phenomenon your people might call a massive organic explosion. You're talking about destroying everything, the trees, the tunnels, all the people sleeping below. The people will not be harmed, Elder Nisara assured him. There are escape passages that lead deep into the moon's crust prepared for exactly this eventuality. But everything else, the chambers, the biotechnology, the trees themselves will be destroyed utterly. Mitchell stared at Riona in horror. You can't be serious. You're talking about cultural suicide. We are talking about preventing slavery, the elder replied firmly. Better to be memories than resources. There has to be another way, Mitchell insisted. What about the trade proposals you mentioned? What about diplomatic contact? With whom would we negotiate? Elder Nisara asked. Your military commanders, your corporate executives, your governmental representatives back on the homeworld. How many layers of hierarchy would we have to navigate? How many competing interests would we have to satisfy? Mitchell opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right. The humans had come here with a massive fleet and industrial equipment. They weren't prepared for or expecting diplomatic contact with indigenous life. By the time word got back to Earth and policy decisions were made, the situation on the ground would be irreversible. Is there no compromise? Riona asked quietly. Perhaps one, Elder Nisara admitted. The final protocol need not be immediate. The trees require significant time to prepare for such an ending, perhaps weeks or months. During that time, it might be possible to educate your people about what they face. Educate, Mitchell repeated. Make them understand that this moon is not empty, that it has guardians, that those guardians have power. The elder paused, and when she spoke again, there was something almost mischievous in her ancient voice. Tell me, Sky Friend, how well do your people respond to surprises? Over the next several days, Riona and Mitchell worked with Elder Nisara to develop what they came to call the Revelation Protocol. Instead of waiting for the humans to discover the heart trees through their excavations, they would make contact first on their own terms in a way that would demonstrate both the sophistication and the power of the Rionese. The plan was delicate and incredibly risky. Mitchell would reveal himself to his own people, claiming to have survived the crash and spent months in hiding while recovering from his injuries. He would guide a selected team to one of the smaller heart trees, one that had been specifically prepared for the encounter. The tree will wake partially, Riona explained, as they went over the plan for the dozenth time. Enough to demonstrate its living nature, its intelligence, its partnership with us. But it will also show what happens to those who threaten it. You're sure the tree can control the demonstration? Make it impressive without being actually harmful. The heart trees have been performing such displays for millions of years. They know how to project power without using it destructively. Mitchell nodded, though he still felt uncertain about the whole plan. And you'll be there. Hidden, but yes, along with a delegation of our people. When your leaders see that we are not primitive, not defenseless, perhaps they will choose negotiation over exploitation. And if they don't, if they decide to try to take control anyway, Riona's expression became grim. Then, you will have done all you could to save both our peoples from a devastating conflict. The day chosen for the revelation was bright and clear. By Viral 9 standards, the ever-present ice storms had calmed to a mere whisper of wind across the frozen landscape. Mitchell, dressed in his original flight suit, carefully damaged and aged, to support his story of months spent in hiding. He made his way across the ice fields toward the human base camp, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. After weeks of watching from hiding, it felt strange to be walking openly across the landscape, knowing that human sensors would detect him long before he reached the camp. He was still half a kilometer out when the first patrol found him. 2 soldiers in environmental suits approached with weapons drawn, but not aimed, cautious, but not immediately hostile. "Identify yourself," came the voice over the radio. "Scout Pilot Mitchell Rain, Terran Expeditionary Force serial number 779er Delta 4 Alpha." His voice came out steadier than he'd expected. "I was shot down during the initial survey mission 4 months ago." There was a moment of stunned silence, then rapid chatter over the radio as the information was relayed back to base. Within minutes, a transport vehicle arrived, and Mitchell found himself being rushed back to the camp under heavy escort. The base had grown significantly since his initial observations. What had started as prefabricated modules had expanded into a proper settlement with defensive positions, mining operations, and scientific facilities. As he was rushed through the camp, Mitchell caught glimpses of equipment and personnel that confirmed his worst fears. This wasn't just a survey operation anymore. This was a full-scale colonization effort. He was brought to what was clearly a command center, its walls lined with displays showing everything from geological surveys to orbital tracking data. The man waiting for him wore the insignia of a full colonel, his gray hair and weathered face speaking of decades of military service. "Scout Pilot Rain." The colonel said, his voice carrying a mixture of disbelief and suspicion. "I'm Colonel Vance, commanding officer of Extraction Base Alpha. According to our records, you've been dead for 4 months. "Not dead, sir. Just stranded." Mitchell maintained his military bearing despite the circumstances. "My ship crashed during the initial ice storm. I managed to find shelter in the wreckage, survived on emergency rations and suit recyclers until I could scavenge enough parts to create a basic shelter. For 4 months in this environment." A woman stepped forward, Dr. Sarah Chen, according to her name tag. She was clearly the expedition's chief scientist, her lab coat marked with various sample stains. "The environmental conditions here should have killed you within days." Mitchell had rehearsed this part of his story carefully. "The crash site was near a geothermal vent. I was able to tap into the heat source, create a makeshift shelter." He gestured vaguely toward the direction of the heart tree. "It's about 30 clicks southeast of here in a valley system that provided some protection from the worst storms." "We surveyed that area extensively," Colonel Vance said, his eyes narrowing. "Our teams found no sign of a crash site." "It was buried by ice slides, sir. I marked the location as best I could, but—" Mitchell shrugged. "I was focused on survival, not making things easy for rescue teams." Dr. Chen stepped closer, her expression intense. 30 clicks southeast. That's in the anomaly zone." "Anomaly zone?" Mitchell asked, though he had a sinking feeling he knew what she meant. "Energy readings that don't match anything in our geological surveys. Subsurface structures that seem too regular to be natural formations, organic compounds that shouldn't exist in this environment. Her eyes gleamed with scientific curiosity. "What exactly did you see out there, Pilot Rain?" This was the moment. Mitchell took a deep breath, hoping he was making the right choice. "Dr. Colonel, I need to show you something. Something that changes everything about this mission." Colonel Vance's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm. "What are you talking about?" "I wasn't alone out there. This moon isn't dead, it's not empty. And we are very much not the first intelligent species to make contact with it." Mitchell looked between them, seeing the disbelief and growing alarm in their faces. "The things you're detecting in your surveys, the energy readings, the structures, they're not natural. They're architectural. This moon is inhabited." "That's impossible," Dr. Chen protested. "We've conducted extensive atmospheric analysis, biological surveys, seismic studies. There's no evidence of large-scale life, let alone intelligent life. With respect, Doctor, you've been looking for what you expected to find. You haven't been looking for something actively hiding from you." Colonel Vance stood up, his expression hard. "Pilot, I'm going to need you to explain exactly what you mean by inhabited, and how a stranded pilot with no working communications gear learned this information." "Sir, I need to show you. Words won't be sufficient." Mitchell straightened to full attention. "I request permission to guide a survey team to my crash site. What you find there will change everything." For a long moment, the command center was silent, except for the hum of machinery and the distant sound of construction equipment. Colonel Vance studied Mitchell with the calculating gaze of a man who had survived multiple conflicts by correctly assessing threats and opportunities. "Dr. Chen, assemble a full survey team. Full environmental gear, complete sensor suite, and a security detail." He turned back to Mitchell. "Pilot Rain, you'll be under observation until we confirm your story. If this is some kind of elaborate deception—" "It's not, sir. I wish it were." 2 hours later, Mitchell found himself in the passenger compartment of a heavy transport vehicle, surrounded by scientists, military personnel, and enough scanning equipment to analyze a small planet. The journey to the Heart Tree location was tense, filled with suspicious glances and quiet conversations he wasn't invited to join. Dr. Chen spent most of the trip reviewing data on a portable terminal, comparing it with readings from their portable sensors. "The energy signatures are getting stronger," she murmured to herself. "These readings don't match anything in our database." "Contact the base." Colonel Vance ordered his communications officer. "Tell them we're approaching the anomaly zone, and to maintain open channels." As they crested a ridge that looked down into the valley containing the designated Heart Tree, Mitchell felt his breath catch. Even in its dormant state, the tree was imposing a massive organic structure that rose nearly 200 meters into the air, its bark dark and ancient-looking, its branches spread wide enough to shelter the entire human base. "My God," someone whispered. "That's not on any of our orbital surveys." The sensor technician reported, her voice tight with confusion. "How did we miss something that large?" "Interference," Dr. Chen said, but she didn't sound convinced. "Some kind of natural phenomenon that masked it from our sensors." The vehicle stopped at a safe distance from the tree, and the team disembarked with military precision. Mitchell could see the barely contained excitement on Dr. Chen's face as she directed her people to set up their equipment, and the careful wariness in Colonel Vance's posture as he had his security personnel establish a perimeter. "So where's this crash site?" the colonel asked. Mitchell pointed toward the base of the tree. "The wreckage was buried after I moved to more stable shelter. But sir, the crash site isn't what's important. The tree is." "It's certainly impressive," Dr. Chen agreed, adjusting her tricorder readings. "The age estimates I'm getting are impossible. This tree would have to be thousands of years old. The genetic material is unlike anything in our databases." "Dr. Chen," the sensor technician called out, her voice carrying a note of alarm. "You need to see this. The tree. It's not entirely dormant. I'm reading minimal but consistent energy emissions from the root system bioelectric activity in the trunk thermal regulation that suggests active metabolism. It's alive, Mitchell said simply. Not just alive, but intelligent. And it has been watching us since we arrived on this moon. Before anyone could respond to this declaration, the tree itself provided a demonstration. The massive trunk began to emit a low, resonant sound. Not quite music, not quite speech, but something that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the mind. The bark patterns began to shift and change, revealing underlying structures that pulsed with soft bioluminescence. Some of the soldiers raised their weapons instinctively, but Colonel Vance held up a hand. "Nobody fires unless I give the order." "This is incredible," Dr. Chen breathed her scanner readings off the charts. "It's not just alive, it's communicating. The energy patterns are too complex to be random, too structured to be simple biological functions." The tree's communication grew stronger, more insistent. Sections of the trunk began to iris open, revealing chambers within that glowed with warm, inviting light. The message was clear, even without words. Enter. Learn. Understand. "Absolutely not," Colonel Vance said immediately. "We're not sending anyone into an unknown biological structure without proper analysis containment protocols." "With respect, sir," Mitchell interrupted, "the analysis could take months, and I don't think our hosts are prepared to wait that long." "Hosts," Dr. Chen looked between Mitchell and the tree. "Rain, what exactly happened to you out here?" Before Mitchell could answer, figures emerged from the forest around them. Ryanese warriors moving with predatory grace, surrounding the human team with obviously superior knowledge of the terrain. They made no aggressive moves, carried no visible weapons, but their presence sent a clear message: the humans were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. "Stand down," Colonel Vance barked as his soldiers started to raise their rifles. "Nobody shoots unless fired upon." The largest of the Ryanese stepped forward, and Mitchell recognized her immediately. Veli, the warrior, who had challenged Riona for his bond right. She spoke in accented, but clear English, her voice carrying the authority of command. "Humans of the sky vessels, you have been invited to parley. Will you accept the hospitality of the Heart Tree?" "Who are you?" Colonel Vance demanded. "What are you—" "I am Veli of the Third Line, war leader of the Ryanese people for this region. We are the partners of the trees, the guardians of this world, the ones you have unknowingly trespassed upon." She gestured toward the tree. "You seek resources. We offer knowledge. You may choose which you prefer." Mitchell stepped forward, catching Veli's attention. She nodded slightly, a recognition of his role in the day's events. "Colonel Dr. Chen, these people saved my life. They've been protecting this moon for thousands of years. They're offering to share their knowledge, but only if we approach them with respect, rather than as conquerors." "We're not conquerors," Dr. Chen protested. "We're scientists explorers." Veli's expression didn't change. "You came with warships. You brought extraction equipment. You began taking without asking. These are not the actions of scientists." "She's right," Mitchell said quietly. "Look around you. Mining platforms, military escorts, industrial processors. We came here to take what we wanted, not to explore or learn." Colonel Vance was clearly struggling with a situation far outside normal military protocols. "And if we refuse this parley, then you will learn nothing, take nothing, and leave with what knowledge you already possess." Veli's tone was matter-of-fact. "The heart trees can sleep for millennia, if necessary. Can you maintain your operations here for as long—" Dr. Chen stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. "The bioarchitecture alone, the implications for sustainable technology, medical applications, environmental restoration." She turned to Colonel Vance. "Sir, we have to at least listen to what they're offering." The colonel spent a long moment studying the situation, the alien warriors who had appeared from nowhere, the impossible tree that pulsed with intelligent life, the obvious technological superiority of people who could hide an entire civilization from orbital surveys. "Very well," he said finally. But I'm sending one of my people back to base with a full report first. And we go in armed. Arms will not be needed, Bailey replied. But bring them if they make you feel secure. The Heart Tree has dealt with fearful guests before. While the colonel arranged for a courier to return to base, Mitchell approached Bailey privately. Is Riona here? She waits within. The Heart Tree has prepared a special chamber for this meeting, one that will demonstrate our capabilities without revealing our vulnerabilities. Bailey studied him for a moment. Your people came in great force. They seek more than what was lost in your crash. I know. That's why this has to work. They need to understand that this isn't an empty world to be exploited. And if they cannot be made to understand, Mitchell thought of Elder Nasara's final protocol of the thousands of Ryanese, sleeping beneath the ice of the delicate balance that held their entire civilization together. Then we're all in trouble. The interior of the Heart Tree was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. As soon as they entered through the iris-like opening, they found themselves in a vast chamber that seemed to exist in impossible space, far larger than the tree's external dimensions should have allowed. Bioluminescent patterns covered the walls in complex shifting designs that seemed to respond to the visitor's presence. The air was warm, sweet-scented, and perfectly humidified, despite the frozen wasteland outside. Most remarkably, the chamber seemed to be growing and reshaping itself even as they watched, creating alcoves and seating areas suited for human proportions. The bioengineering is beyond anything we've theorized, Dr. Chen whispered, her scanners working overtime. The tree is actively modifying its internal structure to accommodate us. The computational power required for that kind of real-time biological architecture. Welcome, a new voice said, and Matron Kira entered the chamber with a delegation of elder Ryanese. She wore ceremonial robes that seemed to be made of living light patterns that shifted and flowed with her movements. I am Matron Kira, eldest of this Heart Tree's council. You honor us with your presence. Colonel Vance, clearly out of his element, but maintaining military bearing, stepped forward. I'm Colonel James Vance, Terran Expeditionary Force. We thank you for your hospitality. Please be comfortable. Matron Kira gestured, and the floor began to shape itself into chairs and benches, perfectly suited for human anatomy. We understand you have many questions. We hope to provide answers that will benefit both our peoples. As the humans settled into the impossibly comfortable organic furniture, Riona entered the chamber. Mitchell felt his heart race at seeing her again, even though it had only been hours since they had parted. Pilot Rain. She greeted him formally, then turned to the others. I am Riona of the 7th Line. It was I who discovered your companion after his crash and provided care during his recovery. 4 months, Dr. Chen said, studying Riona with intense scientific curiosity. You cared for him for 4 months. It was necessary, Riona replied carefully. Your species requires significant adaptation to survive in our environment. The Nest Prize needed time to heal to learn to understand. Nest Prize. Colonel Vance's eyebrows rose. Mitchell felt heat rise in his cheeks. It's a cultural concept, like honored guest, but more personal. Matron Kira stepped forward smoothly. Perhaps we should begin with introductions. You have met Riona, who served as your companion's caretaker. This is Bailey, our current war leader, though the concept of war is foreign to our normal way of life. I am Matron Kira, eldest council member of this particular Heart Tree. Heart Tree, Dr. Chen leaned forward. Is that what you call these structures? They are our partners, not our constructions. We shape them, and they shape us across generations of symbiotic evolution. Matron Kira gestured to the walls around them. This tree has been growing for over 3,000 years. It houses nearly 1,500 of our people, provides all our basic needs, and serves as both home and partner. 1,500 people live inside this tree. Colonel Vance looked stunned. Currently sleeping in the deep chambers, yes. When threatened, the Heart Trees can enter a state of dormancy, appearing dead from the outside, while maintaining life within. The matron's tone carried subtle warning. They have been sleeping since your fleet arrived. We're not a threat, Dr. Chen insisted. We're scientists explorers seeking to understand. You brought war vessels, mining equipment, soldiers with weapons designed to kill. Bailey spoke for the first time since entering the chamber. These are not the tools of understanding. They're tools of survival, Colonel Vance replied defensively. Space exploration requires significant resources and protection. We don't know what we'll find on any given world. And yet you came prepared to take regardless of what you found, Matron Kira observed. Your pilot has been most enlightening about your mission parameters. Mitchell shifted uncomfortably. He had indeed shared information about the expedition's true purposes during his time with the Rianese, though he'd tried to present it in the most favorable light possible. What do you want from us? Colonel Vance asked bluntly. Why reveal yourselves now instead of remaining hidden? Because hiding has become impossible. Elder Nisara's voice filled the chamber as she emerged from a passage Mitchell hadn't noticed before. Ancient, beyond imagining, moving slowly, but with unmistakable dignity, she commanded immediate attention from everyone present. Your drilling operations would have found us within days. She continued, settling herself on a throne-like growth that rose from the floor to meet her. Better to meet as equals than to be discovered as specimens. Dr. Chen's eyes went wide. You knew we were coming. How long have you been aware of our presence? Since your first ships entered this system. The heart trees have senses you do not understand, connections across vast distances that allow communication faster than your radio waves. Elder Nisara smiled, and the expression transformed her ancient face. We have been watching your people for decades, learning your languages, studying your methods. We know what you seek. Then you know we mean no harm to indigenous life, Colonel Vance said carefully. We know you mean no deliberate harm, Elder Nisara corrected. But harm from ignorance can be just as destructive as harm from malice. Your people excel at taking what seems useful without understanding what makes it valuable. She gestured, and the chamber's walls began to show images, holographic displays that seemed to be composed of living light. Scenes flashed by human colonies, strip mining entire asteroids, atmospheric processors converting breathable worlds into industrial wastelands, biodiverse ecosystems reduced to monoculture farms. We have seen what happens to worlds your people find interesting, Elder Nisara said sadly. We would prefer a different outcome. What are you proposing? Dr. Chen asked, her voice tense. Matron Kira stepped forward. Trade, knowledge exchange, partnership instead of exploitation. What kind of partnership? You seek resources, water minerals, energy sources. We can provide these things in sustainable ways through biotechnology that works with natural systems instead of destroying them. The matron gestured to the walls around them. The heart trees can produce anything they need from basic organic compounds. We can grow buildings, tools, vehicles, computers, all living, all self-maintaining, all in harmony with the environment. Dr. Chen looked like she might faint from excitement. The applications, sustainable architecture that grows and adapts, biocomputers that think and solve problems, medical technology that works with the body's natural systems. All possible, Elder Nisara confirmed. In exchange, we ask for protection, recognition of our sovereignty over this moon, guarantees that our way of life will be preserved. And if we refuse, Colonel Vance asked. The chamber fell silent. When Elder Nisara spoke again, her voice carried the weight of absolute finality. Then, you will find this moon far less hospitable than you expect. The heart trees can defend themselves when necessary. They have survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, solar flares, and the rise and fall of several previous civilizations. Your mining equipment will find it difficult to penetrate ground that actively resists. Your atmospheric processors will struggle against organisms that can modify local weather patterns. You're threatening us. We are explaining reality, Bailey interjected. You cannot take what will not be taken. You cannot harvest what defends itself. You cannot mine what turns to stone at your approach. To demonstrate, a section of the chamber wall suddenly hardened, becoming crystalline and impenetrable. Sensors indicated it was now harder than titanium steel. Then, just as suddenly, it returned to its normal organic state. But, Matron Kira said peacefully, cooperation offers benefits to both our peoples. You gain access to revolutionary biotechnology. We gain protection from future exploitation. Colonel Vance was clearly struggling with concepts far beyond normal military decision-making authority. I don't have the power to negotiate treaties or trade agreements. These decisions would have to be made by political leadership back on Earth. We understand, Elder Nisara said. But initial agreements could be reached here subject to approval by your greater authority. Perhaps a demonstration of our capabilities would help convince your leaders. What kind of demonstration? Riona spoke for the first time since the formal introductions. We could provide immediate aid to your current operations. Your atmospheric processors are struggling with the unique chemistry of our atmosphere. Your mining equipment breaks down frequently in our cold. Your people suffer from exposure despite their protective gear. We could solve these problems within days, Matron Kira added. Show you personally the value of partnership over conquest. Mitchell watched the interplay of emotions and calculations across Colonel Vance's face. The veteran officer was clearly weighing options, assessing threats, trying to determine the safest course of action. Dr. Chen, what's your assessment? The scientist looked between her scanners and the impossible chamber around them. Sir, the technology here is centuries beyond anything we have. The biological engineering alone would revolutionize every field from architecture to medicine. If they're offering to share this knowledge, at what cost? The colonel asked, turning back to the Rianese. Recognition, Elder Nisara said simply. Respect. The guarantee that our people will be allowed to live as they choose on the world that has been their home for millennia. Colonel Vance stood up and immediately the organic furniture adjusted to accommodate his movement. He walked to where the wall had demonstrated its defensive capabilities, studying the perfectly normal surface. I need to consult with my superiors, he said finally. This is far beyond my authority to negotiate. Of course, Matron Kira agreed graciously. But while you await instructions, perhaps you would accept our assistance with the immediate challenges facing your mission, a gesture of good faith from both sides. What kind of assistance? Riona stepped forward, and Mitchell noticed how carefully she moved, how her every gesture seemed calculated to appear non-threatening while demonstrating competence. Your mining operation in Sector 7 has been experiencing equipment failures due to unexpected subsurface composition. We could provide analysis that would solve these problems. She paused, then continued. Your atmospheric processors are fighting constant contamination from organic compounds they cannot identify. We could modify them to work in harmony with the local ecosystem. You've been monitoring our operations. Colonel Vance's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. We monitored everything on this moon, Bailey said bluntly. We needed to understand the scope of your intentions. Sir, Dr. Chen interjected. If they can solve our processing problems, we could establish full atmospheric operation weeks ahead of schedule. The applications for the biotechnology alone. Elder Nisara raised one aged hand. Perhaps a small demonstration would be appropriate. Something immediate visible that shows the potential for cooperation. She spoke in the Rianese language, her words carrying a musical quality that seemed to resonate through the chamber itself. In response, the walls began to change, growing transparent, to reveal the interior structure of the heart tree. What they saw defied every principle of architecture and biology the humans understood. The tree was indeed hollow, but the space inside was organized like a vast city. Platforms and bridges grew organically from the walls, connecting chambers of every size and purpose. Bioluminescent pathways carried flowing streams of nutrients, while others carried what could only be information patterns of light that moved with purposeful direction. Every chamber serves a purpose, Matron Kira explained. Living quarters, workshops, laboratories, gardens, archives. The tree provides everything needed for a complete civilization. How many of these trees are there? Dr. Chen asked breathlessly. On this moon, 17 though, not all are fully mature. Throughout this system, hundreds. Elder Nisara smiled at the human's expression. We are not a small civilization, Dr. Chen. We are simply a careful one. Colonel Vance turned away from the revelations around him to face Mitchell directly. Pilot Rain, I need to know exactly what your status is here. Are you a prisoner, a collaborator, an agent of these people? Mitchell had been dreading this question, but he knew he had to answer honestly. Sir, I was rescued by Riona after my crash. She and her people saved my life, tended my injuries, provided shelter and food. In return, I learned about their culture, their way of life. And now? Mitchell glanced at Riona, seeing encouragement in her luminous eyes. Now, I understand what's at stake here. Sir, these people have something we can't take by force, can't steal, can't duplicate. They're offering to share it freely, but only if we treat them as equals. You sound like you've gone native pilot. I've learned to see a bigger picture, sir. The resources we came here to extract, they're nothing compared to what these people can teach us. Dr. Chen stepped forward again. Colonel, I have to agree with the pilot. The biotechnology we're seeing here could solve dozens of problems back home. Environmental restoration, sustainable energy, zero-waste manufacturing, medical applications, we can't even imagine yet. And all they want in return is to be left alone on their own world. To be allowed to live as they choose, Elder Nisara corrected. We are not isolationists. We simply insist on the right to determine our own destiny. Colonel Vance was quiet for a long moment, considering. When he spoke, it was with the careful precision of a man choosing his words very carefully. I will recommend to my superiors that we enter into preliminary negotiations, but I need guarantees. Proof that you can deliver what you're promising, and assurance that my people and equipment will not be harmed while these discussions proceed. You have our word, Matron Kira said solemnly. The heart tree and all who dwell within it swear by the old bonds that no harm will come to your people while you approach us in peace. And the immediate assistance you mentioned? Riona stepped forward. I could accompany a team back to your base, assess the problems you're experiencing, provide solutions that demonstrate our capabilities. You'd leave the tree, come to our base. If it would help build trust between our peoples, yes. Colonel Vance looked at Mitchell. Pilot Rain, I'm going to need you to return with us as well. Complete debriefing, full medical evaluation, detailed report on everything you've experienced here. Understood, sir. Very well. The colonel turned back to Elder Nisara. We'll return to base and begin preparing reports for Earth. In the meantime, I accept your offer of assistance with our technical problems. But I want it clearly understood this is not an agreement, just a demonstration of good faith from both sides. Understood, Colonel Vance, Elder Nisara replied. May this be the beginning of a long and mutually beneficial relationship between our peoples. As they prepared to leave the heart tree, Mitchell felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that the initial contact had gone better than he'd feared, anxiety about what lay ahead, and a strange sense of sadness at leaving this incredible place. Riona approached him as the others gathered near the exit. The Nest Prize has done well today. You have helped both our peoples take the first steps toward understanding. I hope it's enough, Mitchell replied. My people can be difficult when they want something badly. And your Matron Kira and Elder Nisara can be equally formidable when protecting what they value, Riona assured him. The heart tree has survived for 3,000 years by knowing when to bend and when to stand firm. She paused, then spoke more quietly. Will you return? When the discussions are concluded, when the agreements are made, will you come back to the nest? Mitchell looked into her eyes. Those large, luminous eyes that had watched over him during his recovery, that had shown him wonders beyond human imagination. If I can find a way. If there's a place for a human in your world, there will always be a place for you in my nest, Mitchell Rain. The return journey to the human base camp was subdued, filled with the weight of everything that had been revealed. Dr. Chen spent the entire trip composing preliminary reports, her excitement barely contained. Colonel Vance maintained radio silence with base until they were close enough for secure communications. As they crested the final ridge before the base, Mitchell could see the bustling activity of the human settlement. From this perspective, with his new understanding of the delicate ecosystem they had intruded upon, the human presence looked crude, invasive, almost violent in its mechanical efficiency. "Colonel," he said quietly, "there's something else you need to know. About the Ryanese, about what they're capable of if negotiations fail." Vance turned to him. "What are you talking about?" "They have a final option. If they're faced with exploitation, with the destruction of their way of life." Mitchell took a deep breath. "They can choose to destroy everything rather than let it be taken. The heart trees, the technology, all of it. They call it the final protocol. Suicide. Cultural preservation. Better to be remembered as legends than enslaved as resources." Colonel Vance was quiet for a moment. "And you believe they'd actually do this?" "Sir, I've lived with these people for months. They're not bluffing. If pushed to choose between exploitation and extinction, they'll choose extinction. Then we'd better make sure it doesn't come to that." As their transport entered the base camp, Mitchell could see teams of scientists and military personnel gathering, clearly briefed on their arrival and eager for answers. The next few hours would determine the future relationship between two civilizations and potentially the fate of an entire world. But as he caught sight of Riona stepping out of the vehicle, her white fur gleaming in the artificial lights of the human base, Mitchell allowed himself a moment of hope. Maybe this first contact would prove that understanding was possible across the vast differences that separated species. The human base camp buzzed with activity as word spread of the visitors from the tree. Colonel Vance had clearly radioed ahead because a full reception committee was waiting, scientists, military personnel, and various specialists Mitchell didn't recognize. Dr. Chen immediately launched into an animated discussion with her fellow scientists, her tablet full of scans and readings from the heart tree. Mitchell could hear fragments of excited conversation. Bioarchitecture beyond theoretical possibility. Symbiotic relationships that challenge evolutionary theory. Technology that's more like art than engineering. Colonel Vance, meanwhile, was deep in conversation with his senior staff, their voices low and urgent. Mitchell caught phrases like potential security implications, diplomatic protocols, and Earth Command needs to know immediately. Riona stood slightly apart from the human bustle, her 4 hands clasped formally, her large eyes taking in everything with calm assessment. Several humans stared at her with open curiosity, some approaching cautiously, before losing their nerve and retreating. Dr. Chen, one of the base scientists, called out, "The readings you're showing, they're not possible. Living tissue can't support this kind of structural integrity." "I know exactly how impossible they seem," Chen replied excitedly. "That's what makes them so revolutionary. The cellular structure is unlike anything in our database. It's as if every cell is both biological and technological simultaneously." Mitchell found himself caught between two worlds, called for debriefing by the human command staff, but reluctant to leave Riona alone among people who saw her as a curiosity rather than a person. "Pilot Rain," a voice called, and Mitchell turned to see a woman in scientist clothing approaching. "I'm Dr. Elena Rodriguez, xenobiology specialist. I've been asked to conduct your medical evaluation." "Medical evaluation?" "Standard protocol for extended exposure to alien environments. We need to make sure you haven't picked up any pathogens, genetic modifications, or other biological changes." She glanced toward Riona. 4 months of close contact with a non-human species requires thorough examination. Mitchell felt a flash of irritation at the clinical tone, but he recognized the necessity. "Of course, doctor. When would you like to begin?" "Immediately if possible. The portable medical scanner is in Lab Module C. As Dr. Rodriguez led him away, Mitchell caught Riona's eye. She nodded slightly, a gesture that somehow conveyed both understanding and reassurance. The medical examination was thorough and invasive, involving everything from blood tests to neural scans. Dr. Rodriguez maintained a professional demeanor throughout, but Mitchell could see the excitement building in her expression as the results came in. "Fascinating," she murmured, studying her screen. "Your immune system shows traces of exposure to completely unknown biological agents, but instead of infection or adverse reaction, you show enhanced immune function. Disease resistance improved by approximately 300%. Is that bad? Bad, Mr. Rain, this is unprecedented. You've been exposed to alien biochemistry for months, and instead of getting sick, you've gotten healthier." She pulled up more data. "Your cellular regeneration rate is enhanced. Your neurological function shows improved efficiency in several areas. Even your bone density has increased." "What does that mean?" "It means the environment you were living in, the food you were eating, possibly even the air you were breathing. It was all optimized for human physiology in ways that shouldn't be possible without detailed prior knowledge of our biology." Mitchell thought of the heart tree adjusting its chambers for human comfort, of the food Riona had provided that always seemed perfectly nutritious, of how quickly his injuries had healed under her care. "They knew," he said quietly. "They knew how to care for humans because they'd been studying us." That would be my conclusion. The level of precision involved suggests extensive prior research into human physiology. Dr. Rodriguez saved her data and began packing up her equipment. "I'll need to run more detailed analysis, but preliminary results suggest that your alien friends didn't just save your life, they improved it." When Mitchell emerged from the medical lab, he found the base camp in the midst of intense activity. Mobile laboratories were being assembled, communication equipment was being configured for long-range transmission to Earth, and he could see several groups engaged in heated discussions about protocols and procedures. Colonel Vance spotted him and waved him over to where he stood with a group of senior staff. "Rain, I need you to participate in a full debriefing session. Everything you experienced, every detail of their technology, their society, their capabilities." The colonel's expression was grim. "Earth Command is very interested in this development." "Sir, what has Earth Command been told exactly?" "The basics. First contact with intelligent alien life, advanced biotechnology potential, for either cooperation or conflict, depending on how we handle the situation." Vance lowered his voice. "There's already discussion about sending additional forces, science teams, diplomatic corps." "How many additional forces?" "That's still being determined. But Rain, I need you to be completely honest in your debriefing. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with here." The debriefing session took place in the base's main conference room, with Mitchell seated at one end of a long table, facing a panel of officers, scientists, and specialists he didn't recognize. They had him start from the beginning, the crash, his injuries, first contact with Riona, and questioned every detail extensively. "You say she called you her nest prize," one of the officers repeated. "What exactly does that mean in their culture?" Mitchell chose his words carefully. "It's a term of protection and responsibility. She was responsible for my welfare, and in return, I was expected to contribute to the household." "Contribute how?" "Helping with daily tasks, sharing knowledge about human culture, learning about theirs." Mitchell didn't mention the more intimate aspects of the bondmate relationship. "And you were free to leave at any time?" "Theoretically, yes. But practically leaving would have meant certain death in the environment outside." "So you were essentially a prisoner?" "No," Mitchell said firmly. "I was a guest who couldn't survive on my own. There's a difference." A scientist leaned forward. "You described their technology as bio-based. Can you elaborate on that?" "Everything is alive or derived from living things. Their computers are biological. Their architecture grows, rather than being built. Their tools are cultivated, rather than manufactured." Mitchell paused, trying to find words for concepts that didn't translate well. They don't separate artificial from natural. Everything is part of a living system. And they claim this technology could benefit us. They've demonstrated it. The heart tree where I lived provided everything needed for a comfortable life. Food warmth, clean air and water, even entertainment in the form of interactive displays. Mitchell looked around the table. But the important thing is, they're offering to share this knowledge freely. For what price? Recognition of their sovereignty over this moon, protection from exploitation, the right to maintain their way of life. Colonel Vance interjected. Rain, in your assessment, what are their defensive capabilities? If negotiations fail, what are we looking at in terms of conflict? Mitchell had been dreading this question. Sir, I believe any military confrontation would be catastrophic for both sides. They have technology we don't understand, home field advantage, and... He paused, wondering how much to reveal about the final protocol. They have options we would consider extreme. What kind of options? The capability to deny us anything we might try to take by force. Scorched earth tactics, but with biotechnology that could affect the entire moon's ecosystem. Several people started talking at once, but Colonel Vance held up a hand for silence. Are you saying they could make the entire moon uninhabitable? I'm saying they have the power to ensure we gain nothing by conquest, that we couldn't gain more easily through cooperation. The questions continued for hours, covering everything from Riani's social structure to the operational principles of their biotechnology. Mitchell answered as honestly as he could, while trying to protect the more sensitive information about their capabilities. As the session was winding down, his escort from the heart tree was announced. Sir, the communications officer said, our guest from the alien settlement is asking to speak with Pilot Rain. She says she has a demonstration prepared. A demonstration of what? She didn't specify, sir. Just said it would help resolve the technical problems we've been experiencing with atmospheric processing. Colonel Vance looked thoughtful. Very well. Escort her to Lab Module B and let's see what she can show us. Mitchell found Riona in the atmospheric processing lab, surrounded by curious scientists and equipment she was examining with intense focus. She had somehow acquired local clothing, a jumpsuit, that had been modified to accommodate her unique physiology. Riona, Mitchell called, and she turned to him with what he'd learned to recognize as relief. Nest Prize. I have been learning about your people's approach to atmospheric modification. It is inefficient. Inefficient how? May I? She gestured toward one of the processing units. The attending technician, Dr. Kim, nodded nervously. Riona moved to the machine with fluid grace, studying its external configuration for a moment, before removing a small device from her belt, the same organic computer she'd used for translation when they first met. She placed it against the processing unit's casing and closed her eyes in concentration. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then lines of bioluminescent light began to spread from the device, across the machine's surface, like electronic circuitry, but organic, alive. The patterns grew more complex, more beautiful, until the entire processing unit was covered in a web of living light. Fascinating, Dr. Kim breathed. What is it doing? Learning, Riona replied, without opening her eyes. Understanding how your machine works, what it's trying to accomplish, why it struggles in our environment. The lights pulsed faster, brighter, and then began to sink into the machine itself, disappearing beneath the surface. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the processing unit hummed to life, with a sound Mitchell had never heard before, smoother, more musical, almost like the unit was singing. My God, Dr. Kim was staring at his readouts. The efficiency just jumped by 400%. Processing speed increased, energy consumption down by half, and the contamination we've been fighting. It's just gone. The machine now works with the environment instead of fighting it, Riona explained, opening her eyes and retrieving her device. Your approach focused on forcing the atmosphere to conform to your needs. I have taught it to harmonize with what already exists. You improved our technology in 5 minutes. Dr. Chen had appeared at some point during the demonstration, her expression odd. I offered it a partnership with the systems it was trying to control. Most problems become much simpler when approached cooperatively rather than confrontationally. Dr. Kim was running diagnostic after diagnostic, his excitement growing with each result. This is revolutionary. Do you realize what this means for terraforming, for hostile environment operations, for proving that cooperation benefits everyone? Colonel Vance's voice interrupted. He had entered the lab during the demonstration and watched the entire process. Ms. Riona, that was very impressive. This is only a small example of what partnership between our peoples could accomplish, Colonel Vance. I'm beginning to see that. The colonel studied the readings on Dr. Kim's instruments. Your people would be willing to share this kind of technology. In return for recognition and protection, yes. We see no value in knowledge hoarded. Riona turned to Mitchell. However, I should return to the heart tree soon. The matrons are concerned about the extended absence. Of course. Mr. Rain, you'll accompany our guest back to the tree for further discussions? Mitchell felt relief and anticipation in equal measure. Yes, sir. As they prepared to leave the base camp, Mitchell noticed the change in how the humans reacted to Riona. Where before, there had been curious stares and nervous whispers, now there was respectful attention. Word of her demonstration had spread quickly, and several scientists approached, asking technical questions about bioharmonization theory. You've made quite an impression, Mitchell told her, as they boarded the transport that would take them back to the heart tree. Good. Your people respond well to proof. Words alone would not have convinced them. And what happens now? Now we wait to see what your leaders on the homeworld decide. The matrons have prepared for all possibilities. The ride back to the heart tree gave Mitchell time to process everything that had happened. In the span of a single day, first contact had been made, technology had been demonstrated, and the foundation for future cooperation had been laid. But he also knew that the real challenges were just beginning. As the transport approached the valley with the heart tree, Mitchell was surprised to see significant activity around the massive organism. Other Ryanese were visible moving about the base of the tree, and what appeared to be construction or growth was taking place. What's happening? He asked Riona. Preparation. If your people send more vessels, more scientists, more soldiers, we must be ready to accommodate them properly. The heart tree is growing new chambers, new interfaces, new ways to bridge the gap between our technologies. The tree itself looked different than when they'd left just hours before. New growths were visible near its base structures that looked designed to house human visitors with architectural elements that seemed familiar despite their organic nature. Are you building an entire embassy? We are growing one, yes. If there are to be extensive negotiations, both sides will need proper facilities. As they disembarked from the transport, Elder Nisara emerged from the tree to greet them. Despite her age, she moved with purpose and energy. Mitchell Rain returns and brings good word, I hope. The immediate reception was positive, Mitchell reported. They're preparing reports for Earth, and the technical demonstration made a strong impression. Good. Come, both of you. The Council has much to discuss, and time may be shorter than we hoped. Inside the heart tree, Mitchell found the assembly chamber transformed. What had been an impressive but relatively simple space was now a complex nexus of activity. Organic displays showed multiple views of the moon's surface, tracking the human activities with precision that suggested surveillance capabilities far beyond what they'd revealed. Your people work quickly, Matron Kira observed as they entered. But they also bring more vessels. These are larger with different purposes. The displays showed the orbital space around Viral 9, and Mitchell's heart sank. The small research fleet he'd known about had been joined by much larger vessels, troop transports, engineering ships, and what looked like corporate vessels. How long until they arrive? 3 days, perhaps 4. Your Colonel Vance has been honest about informing his superiors of the situation. Perhaps too honest. Mitchell studied the display. Those aren't just research ships. That's a full colonization fleet. We know, Elder Nisara said grimly, which is why the Council has made certain decisions. She gestured and the displays changed to show the heart tree network across Viral 9. All 17 mature trees were visible, along with dozens of smaller saplings Mitchell hadn't known existed. If your people come in force seeking to claim what they see, we will be ready. The trees have been prepared for the final protocol. Elder, please, Mitchell said urgently. Give the negotiations a chance. Not all humans are conquerors. Many genuinely want peaceful contact. And many wish to possess what they find beautiful or useful, Bailey added, entering the chamber. The fleet composition suggests your corporate entities have become involved. We know what that means. Mitchell couldn't deny the truth in her words. The arrival of corporate vessels changed everything. Scientific curiosity was one thing, but corporate interest meant exploitation was inevitable. What if we could establish formal contact before the corporate fleet arrives? He asked. Make it clear that this world is already claimed, already inhabited. By whom would we be recognized? Matron Kira asked. Your government, your military, your corporations, which has the power to protect what they recognize. It was a question Mitchell couldn't answer, because he wasn't sure he knew the answer himself. The politics of colonial expansion were complex, with overlapping jurisdictions between government, military, and corporate interests. However, Elder Nassara said, all is not yet decided. You and Riona will return to the human base tomorrow. There will be a larger delegation this time, and we will make our position clear to all who have come to our world. All of us, Mitchell asked. The time for gradual revelation has passed. Your people will meet our full council, see our complete capabilities, and understand the choice they face. The elder's expression was serious, but not unkind. We hope wisdom will prevail, but we are prepared if it does not. That evening, Mitchell stood on a platform high in the heart tree, looking out through a transparent section at the human base camp in the distance. The lights of human activity were clearly visible against the ice, and darkness looking strangely alien in this ancient landscape. Riona joined him, her presence warm and comforting in the cold air. Are you worried? She asked. I'm terrified, Mitchell admitted. Everything I've learned here, everything your people have shown me, it could all be destroyed by greed and misunderstanding. The heart trees have survived ice ages and asteroid impacts. They will survive your people as well, one way or another. That's what I'm afraid of. The final protocol, if it comes to that, it won't just be the destruction of the trees. It'll be the loss of everything they represent. Knowledge, beauty, an entire way of life. Riona moved closer, one of her upper hands coming to rest on his shoulder. The Nest Prize has learned wisdom during his time with us. Perhaps he can teach that wisdom to his own people. I'll try, but I'm just one person. The forces I'll be up against. Are you one person? Riona asked. Or are you a bridge between two worlds? Sometimes one person in the right place can change the course of history. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the alien lights in the distance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and possibly the decision that would determine the fate of both their peoples. But tonight, beneath the stars of Viral 9, with the heartbeat of the ancient tree beneath their feet and the warmth of genuine connection between them, Mitchell allowed himself to hope that understanding might yet triumph over fear, that partnership might prove stronger than conquest. The future of two civilizations hung in the balance, and Mitchell Rain found himself at the center of it all, wondering if a crash-landed pilot and a sympathetic alien Beastwoman could really make a difference in the face of such enormous forces. Time would tell. But if there was one thing he'd learned from his time with the Rionese, it was that even the most unlikely partnerships could create something beautiful, something worth protecting. The next morning brought a delegation unlike anything the human base had seen. No small group of representatives this time, an entire procession of Rionese emerged from the heart tree, representing every aspect of their society. Elder Nassara led them, supported by a living sedan chair that flowed along the ground like a vehicle, but was clearly biological. Behind her came the matrons of all the major lines, each accompanied by specialists in different aspects of Rionese culture and technology. Most impressive were the warforms Rheanese who had undergone biological modification for combat, their bodies larger and more imposing than the standard form, their fur marked with natural patterns that seemed to shift and change like living camouflage. They formed an honor guard around the delegation, making it clear that the Rheanese were not helpless, despite their peaceful intentions. Mitchell rode with the delegation, watching the reactions of his fellow humans as the procession approached the base. Alarms were sounding, soldiers were taking positions, and he could see frantic activity as the command staff prepared for what must seem like either a formal embassy or an invasion force. Colonel Vance met them at the base perimeter with a full honor guard of his own. To his credit, he had chosen to receive the delegation with formal military courtesy rather than defensive hostility. Elder Nisara, he greeted her as the procession stopped. "We welcome your delegation to our base." Colonel Vance, the elder, replied, dismounting from her chair with surprising agility. "We come to speak of the future, yours and ours." "Then, you should know that situation has become more complex. We've received word that additional ships are approaching this system, ships with broader authority than my own. We are aware of the approaching vessels. Indeed, it is because of them that we come to you now." Elder Nisara gestured, and the delegation spread out in formation that was clearly ceremonial, but also demonstrated their impressive organization and discipline. "Perhaps we should move this discussion to a more formal setting," Colonel Vance suggested. "Indeed, but first a demonstration." Elder Nisara spoke a single word in the Rheanese language, and the ground beneath them responded. Plants began to grow from the frozen earth with impossible speed. Not normal plants, but structures that were part vegetation, part architecture. Within minutes, a magnificent outdoor pavilion had grown around them, its living walls providing shelter from the wind while allowing full visibility. The watching humans gasped and stepped back while several weapons were raised instinctively before Colonel Vance ordered his people to stand down. "Impressive," the colonel said, his voice carefully controlled. "Elementary," Elder Nisara replied with a slight smile. "Our children learn such things in their first decade of life." A new voice interrupted the exchange. "Colonel Vance, what the hell is going on down there?" Everyone turned to see a group of new arrivals approaching, clearly not part of the military expedition. Their leader was a middle-aged woman in expensive cold-weather gear, marked with corporate logos, flanked by what were obviously private security personnel. "Ms. Thorne." Colonel Vance's voice carried a note of strained patience. "You were supposed to remain with your ship until formal briefings could be arranged." "Briefings, Colonel. When my people detected massive energy signatures and what appeared to be accelerated biological growth, I decided the situation required immediate assessment." The woman's eyes fixed on the Rheanese delegation, and Mitchell saw calculation and greed in her expression. "I am Director Samantha Thorne, CEO of Galactic Biosolutions. And you," she addressed Elder Nisara directly, "represent the most valuable discovery in human expansion history." A dangerous stillness fell over the Rheanese delegation. Riona moved protectively closer to Mitchell, while Vayli and the warforms shifted into positions that were unmistakably defensive. "Ms. Thorne," Colonel Vance said carefully, "may I suggest we conduct formal introductions in a more appropriate setting?" "What I suggest," Director Thorne replied, "is that we discuss the licensing agreements for this biotechnology immediately. My company is prepared to offer substantial compensation for exclusive development rights." "You speak of agreements," Elder Nisara said, her ancient voice carrying new edge, "but you offer to buy what is not for sale from those who are not sellers." "Everything is for sale," Thorne replied dismissively. "It's just a matter of finding the right price." Mitchell felt the tension building to a breaking point and stepped forward. "Director Thorne, perhaps you don't understand the situation here. The Rheanese are not a resource to be purchased or developed. They're a sovereign people with their own rights and territory." Thorne looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. "And you are?" "Scout pilot Mitchell Rain. I've been living with the Rheanese for the past 4 months." Her expression shifted to something predatory. Ah, yes, the missing pilot. You must have learned quite a lot about their capabilities during your captivity. I was never a captive, Mitchell said firmly. I was a guest, a student, and eventually a member of their community. Community. Thorne laughed. Mr. Rain, what you call community, I call the most advanced biological technology in known space. These people represent biotechnology worth trillions of credits. Medical applications, environmental engineering, computational biology. The applications are limitless. Veli stepped forward, her voice hard as ice. You speak of us as if we were machines to be exploited. You're far more valuable than machines, Thorne replied, apparently missing the threat in Veli's tone. You're live adaptive systems. My company specializes in biotechnology acquisition and development. We could offer your people technology resources protection in exchange for full access to your biological innovations. Protection from what? Elder Nisara asked quietly. From other corporations who might not be as generous in their offers. From governments that might decide your technology poses a security threat. From military actions that might be deemed necessary if cooperation cannot be achieved. The threat in her words was poorly veiled, and the reaction was immediate. The Rianese warforms moved from defensive to clearly aggressive positions. The living pavilion itself seemed to respond, its walls thickening and taking on a more fortress-like appearance. Ms. Thorne, Colonel Vance said urgently, I strongly advise stepping back from this confrontation. These people have defensive capabilities you don't understand. Colonel, with respect, defending indigenous populations is not your mission here. Securing valuable resources for the advancement of human civilization is. Mitchell felt something snap inside him. Ms. Thorne, you're talking about enslaving an entire civilization for profit. I'm talking about bringing sustainable technology to billions of humans who need it. The greater good, Mr. Rain. The greater good, Elder Nisara's voice, had changed, taking on harmonics that seemed to resonate through everyone present. You would destroy our culture, our way of life, our very souls for the greater good of your people. I would integrate your people into human civilization, where they can contribute their unique abilities to the benefit of all. Ah, Elder Nisara nodded slowly. I understand now. You do not see us as people at all. You see us as resources, as tools. Director Thorne had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable, but her resolve didn't waver. I see incredibly advanced beings whose knowledge could save countless human lives, restore damaged ecosystems, revolutionize medicine and technology. Surely that's worth some accommodation on both sides. What she's describing is cultural genocide, Mitchell said flatly. The end of the Rianese as a free people. Mr. Rain has spent too much time among aliens, Thorne replied dismissively. His perspective has been compromised. These beings, no matter how advanced, are not human. Their survival is secondary to the advancement of our species. That was when Matron Kira spoke. She had been silent throughout the exchange, but now she stepped forward with quiet dignity. Director Thorne, you offer protection from threats. What if we do not wish your protection? What if we choose to protect ourselves? I'm sure an accommodation can be reached. No accommodations, no agreements. Choose now. Matron Kira's voice carried complete finality. Leave this world in peace. Take your ships, your soldiers, your machines, and go. Or remain and face the consequences of your choice. Are you threatening human civilians and equipment? We are offering you the chance to leave with honor. The alternative is less pleasant. Director Thorne looked between the Rianese delegation and Colonel Vance's increasingly uncomfortable-looking soldiers. Colonel, are you going to allow these beings to threaten human citizens? Ms. Thorne, my mission is to ensure the safety of human personnel and facilitate peaceful contact with indigenous life. Your demands go far beyond those parameters. My company has contracts with Earth government. Our rights here are legally established. Your contracts, Elder Nisara said softly, are with each other. They are not with us. You cannot sell what you do not own, and you cannot own what chooses to be free. The standoff stretched tense and brittle with both sides, clearly prepared for conflict. Mitchell realized that everything the future of both species, the survival of the heart trees, the delicate possibility of cooperation, hung in the balance of this moment. "There's another way," he said, suddenly loud enough to catch everyone's attention. "Another option nobody's considered." All eyes turned to him, and Mitchell felt the weight of the moment. What if partnership doesn't mean ownership? What if it means actual cooperation between equals? "Explain," Director Thorne demanded. The Rheanese offering to share their knowledge freely in exchange for recognition of their sovereignty. No exploitation, no integration, no acquisition. Just trade their biotechnology for human resources and protection from those who would exploit them. "That's not how interspecies resource management works," Thorne protested. "Maybe it's how it should work," Mitchell shot back. "Maybe the fact that they're offering to share everything freely should tell us something about their character. Maybe the question isn't how we can use them, but how we can learn from them." Colonel Vance stepped forward. "Mr. Rain has a point. The demonstration we've seen suggests these people could solve environmental and technological problems that have plagued human colony worlds for decades. Why force a conflict when cooperation would benefit everyone?" "Because cooperation implies equality," Thorne said bluntly. "And human civilization doesn't expand through equality with alien species." Mitchell felt the finality of her statement settle over the gathering like a death sentence. This wasn't about misunderstanding or communication failure. It was about fundamental differences in how the two sides viewed the universe. Elder Nassara spoke one more time, her voice carrying the weight of millennia. "Then, you have chosen. Colonel Vance, you are a man of honor. You and your soldiers may depart safely whenever you wish. Your people will always be welcome here." "And the others?" Colonel Vance asked. "Others who come in peace will be welcomed. Those who come seeking to take what is not freely given." She didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. Director Thorne's expression hardened. "Colonel, I'll be filing formal complaints with Earth Command about your failure to secure valuable resources for human civilization. My company will be launching its own expeditions to this moon with or without military support." "You're welcome to try," Valey said pleasantly. "But I should mention that our defensive systems are somewhat more sophisticated than what you've seen so far." As if to demonstrate the ground around the human base, camp suddenly bloomed with what looked like beautiful flowers, until Mitchell realized they were actually sophisticated sensor, defensive nodes, capable of monitoring and potentially neutralizing any threat to the Rheanese. "This isn't over," Thorne declared, signaling to her security team. "My corporation has invested too much in this mission to be deterred by alien threats." As Thorne and her people retreated toward their landing craft, Colonel Vance turned to Elder Nassara. "I apologize for Ms. Thorne's behavior. Not all humans think as she does. We know this, Colonel. It is why we still hope for peaceful resolution." "What happens now?" "Now we wait. Your people will choose between cooperation and conflict. We hope they choose wisely, but we are prepared for either outcome." Mitchell realized with growing dread that this first contact, which had started with such promise, was rapidly spiraling toward disaster. The corporate interests that Thorne represented would not give up easily, and their resources far exceeded anything the military expedition could muster. "Elder Nassara," he said quietly, "there's something you need to know about human corporate culture. Director Thorne's company won't just give up and leave. They'll be back in greater force with more resources." "We know," the elder replied sadly. "It was always a possibility. But sometimes hope must be pursued even when wisdom suggests despair." As the Rheanese delegation prepared to return to the Heart Tree, Riona approached Mitchell. "The nest prize should come with us now. Your people will have difficult decisions to make, and it may not be safe for you here." Mitchell looked around the base camp at the soldiers who were watching him with a mixture of suspicion and sympathy, at the scientists who still looked hopeful, that some peaceful resolution could be found at the corporate personnel who were already planning their return. "You're right," he said finally. "My place is with the tree now." As they departed the human base for what might be the last time, Mitchell carried with him the knowledge that he had become more than just a stranded pilot or a rescued human. He had become a bridge between worlds, and that bridge might be about to burn. The return journey to the Heart Tree was conducted in somber silence. The Rianese moved with purpose, but without the ceremonial dignity of their arrival. They had offered peace and been met with demands for surrender. They had offered cooperation and been met with threats of exploitation. As the Heart Tree came into view, Mitchell could see that changes were already taking place. The structure was transforming itself, growing new defensive formations preparing for what might come. Other heart trees in the distance showed similar changes, their bioluminescent patterns shifting from peaceful to what looked distinctly military. "The trees are preparing for war," Mitchell observed. "The trees are preparing to defend themselves," Elder Nisara corrected. "War is a human concept. We think in terms of preservation and protection." Inside the Heart Tree, the assembly chamber had become a command center. Displays showed the orbital space around Viral 9, tracking every human vessel, monitoring their communications, preparing for various scenarios. "Report," Matron Kira requested as they entered. "Director Thorne of Galactic Biosolutions has declared her intention to pursue aggressive acquisition of our biotechnology," Elder Nisara said. "Colonel Vance appears to prefer diplomacy, but may not have sufficient authority to prevent corporate action." "And the approaching fleet? Mixed composition. Some government vessels, some corporate, some military. They will arrive within 2 days." Matron Kira studied the displays thoughtfully. "Then we must be ready to implement all protocols. The Heart Trees across the moon report preparation complete." "All protocols?" Mitchell asked. "Including the final protocol?" "If necessary," Matron Kira confirmed grimly, "though we will exhaust all other options first." Riona moved to stand beside Mitchell. "There may be another way. What if we demonstrated our true capabilities, showed them what they would be trying to fight?" "You mean reveal everything? All the defensive systems, the network connections, the full scope of the Heart Tree civilization?" "Sometimes the threat of overwhelming retaliation prevents conflict better than hidden strength," Valey suggested. Elder Nisara considered this. "It is a risk. Showing our full power might either deter them or make them more determined to possess it." "But hiding our strength hasn't worked," Mitchell pointed out. Director Thorne saw the limited demonstrations and only became more greedy. Maybe it's time to show them exactly what they'd be up against. The debate continued for hours, with various council members arguing for different approaches. Some favored immediate implementation of the final protocol, destroying everything rather than risk enslavement. Others argued for a fighting retreat, abandoning the surface Heart Trees, while the deeper settlements went into permanent hiding. But gradually, consensus built around a middle path, a final demonstration of strength, combined with a last offer of peace. One chance for human leadership to choose wisdom over greed. "Very well," Elder Nisara decided. "We will show them what they truly face, all of it. Every tree, every defense system, every capability we have kept hidden. One final opportunity for them to understand that partnership is their only option. And if they still choose conflict, then we will give them a war unlike anything their species has ever imagined. But afterward, when it is over, there will be nothing left for them to claim." The next day brought the arrival of the corporate fleet in force. Dozens of ships filled the orbital space around Viral 9 mining vessels, construction platforms, troop transports, and what appeared to be mobile research laboratories. Mitchell watched the displays in fascination and horror as the human fleet deployed with military precision, establishing orbital platforms and preparing for large-scale planetary operations. "They're not planning a simple extraction," he observed. "This is a full-scale colonization effort." "With us as the primary resource to be harvested," Valey said grimly. Communications from the human fleet arrived within hours, demands for surrender, offers of protective custody for the Ryanese population, ultimatums about compliance with human colonial law. "They don't even pretend to recognize our sovereignty," Matron Kira said, after reading the transmissions. "Did you expect they would?" Elder Nasara asked. "We are not human. In their minds, this makes us valuable property, not equals." It was then that Colonel Vance's voice came through the communication system, directed specifically to the heart tree. "Elder Nasara, this is Colonel Vance. I've been ordered to deliver an ultimatum from the combined corporate and governmental fleet. You have 24 hours to surrender all Ryanese personnel and technology to human authority. Compliance will result in generous relocation packages and integration support. Non-compliance will be met with appropriate force." "Even he," Riona said sadly. "Even the one who showed some understanding." "He has his orders," Mitchell defended weakly. "He may not have a choice." "There is always a choice," Elder Nisara replied. "Some are simply harder than others." She moved to the communication console and composed her response. "Colonel Vance, this is Elder Nisara of the Ryanese people. We have heard your ultimatum, and we offer our response. At dawn tomorrow, your people will witness what they seek to claim. They will see the true extent of our civilization, our capabilities, and our resolve. After this demonstration, we will offer one final chance for peaceful coexistence. If that offer is rejected, then your people will learn what it means to war against the children of the heart trees." She paused, then added in a gentler tone, "Colonel, you have shown honor and respect. You and any who choose peace over conquest will always be welcome among us. But choose quickly, the time for half measures has passed." That night, Mitchell stood with Riona on an observation platform, high in the heart tree, watching the human fleet's lights glitter in orbit, like artificial stars. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "Terrified," he admitted. "Tomorrow will determine whether our peoples learn to live together or destroy each other trying." The heart tree speaks of cycles, birth, growth, death, and rebirth. Perhaps this too is simply part of a larger cycle. And if it ends in war, if the final protocol becomes necessary. Riona was quiet for a long moment. "Then our people will join the heart trees in the deep sleep, and perhaps in 1,000 years when new growth begins, the children of both our peoples will be wiser than their ancestors." Dawn on Viral 9 came with spectacular display. As the first light touched the moon's surface, every heart tree across the planet began to glow with synchronized bioluminescence that was visible even from orbit. But that was only the beginning. As the light grew stronger, the true scope of the Ryanese civilization revealed itself. Underground, a vast network of connections between all the heart trees lit up, showing that what the humans had seen was not isolated settlements, but nodes in a planetary network. Defensive systems that had remained hidden activated across the moon, organic structures that rose from the ice like flowers, but flowers armed with energy systems that defied human understanding. The very ground itself seemed to come alive, responding to the heart tree's call. In orbit, the human fleet's sensors went crazy as energy readings spiked across the planet. What they had thought was a collection of isolated settlements was revealed to be a single, integrated planetary organism. "My God!" came Colonel Vance's voice over the communications channel. "The entire moon. It's all connected. The trees aren't just buildings, they're organs in a single planetary life form." "Correct, Colonel Vance," Elder Nisara replied. "And now, you understand what your people seek to acquire. Not buildings or technology, but a living world with a mind of its own." The demonstration continued as atmospheric processors across the planet synchronized their actions, creating localized weather effects that painted the sky in impossible colors. Manufacturing centers that had been hidden beneath the ice revealed themselves, showing the humans just how advanced Ryanese technology had become. But the most impressive display came when the heart trees began to project images directly into space. Holographic displays the size of continents, showing the history of the Ryanese, their philosophy, their art, their way of life. This wasn't just a demonstration of power. It was a cultural transmission, an attempt to make the humans understand what they would be destroying. Incredible! Dr. Chen's voice came through the communication channel. The energy output alone would power our entire fleet for years. But the artistry, the beauty of it all? Director Thorne, to all fleet vessels, came a different voice, cold and calculating. Initiate capture protocols. This display only confirms the value of these biological systems. We must secure them immediately. Ms. Thorne. Colonel Vance's voice carried warning. I strongly advise against aggressive action. What we're seeing suggests defensive capabilities far beyond our initial estimates. Defensive capabilities mean nothing against properly deployed extraction teams, Colonel. We're proceeding with the operation. Mitchell watched from the heart tree as corporate vessels began deploying toward the surface, loaded with what could only be specialized capture and containment equipment. The beautiful demonstration of Ryanese culture was about to become a battle. They won't listen, he said to Elder Nasara. Even seeing all this, they still only see property to be claimed. Then they have chosen, the elder replied sadly. Matron Kira, implement the second protocol. The second protocol. Before the final protocol comes the demonstration protocol. Show them what war with the heart trees would actually mean. The change was immediate and terrifying. The beautiful bioluminescent displays shifted from peaceful art to something distinctly martial. The defensive systems that had revealed themselves began to track the approaching human vessels, energy building visibly in organic structures that suddenly looked very much like weapons. The first corporate shuttle to approach a heart tree's landing zone found itself caught in what could only be described as a biomechanical web, organic strands, that shot from the ground and wrapped around the shuttle, holding it immobile without causing damage. Release our vessel immediately. Director Thorne's voice was sharp with anger and fear. Your people are not harmed, Matron Kira replied calmly. But neither will they be allowed to proceed with hostile actions. Withdraw your forces now, and they will be released. Instead of withdrawing, more shuttles launched from the corporate vessels accompanied by what were clearly military escorts. The humans were doubling down on conflict. What followed was a demonstration of defensive capability that defied human understanding. The heart trees didn't just defend themselves, they actively controlled the environment around them. Weather systems formed at will, creating localized storms that buffeted attacking vessels without harming the larger environment. The ground itself became treacherous for landing parties shifting and changing to prevent establishment of base camps. Most impressively, the heart trees demonstrated their ability to neutralize human technology without destroying it. Weapons malfunctioned, communication systems experienced interference, and vehicle engines simply stopped working when they came too close to the defensive perimeters. How are they doing this? Dr. Chen's voice was filled with scientific fascination, even in the middle of the conflict. Biological electromagnetic manipulation. Mitchell explained, having learned about it during his time with the Ryanese. The trees can generate fields that disrupt electronic systems. Everything the humans rely on becomes useless in the defensive zones. Within hours, the corporate assault had been completely neutralized without a single loss of life on either side. Human forces found themselves stranded but unharmed, their equipment disabled but easily repairable once removed from the influence of the heart trees. This is impossible. Director Thorne's voice came through the communications channel, filled with frustration. Our equipment shouldn't be susceptible to biological interference. Your equipment was designed by beings who never imagined biological systems could achieve this level of sophistication, Elder Nasara replied. You thought in terms of artificial versus natural, never considering that the two could be unified. Colonel Vance's voice joined the channel. Elder Nasara, I'm ordering a general withdrawal of human forces. We clearly underestimated your defensive capabilities. A wise decision, Colonel. Your people will not be harmed during the withdrawal. But Director Thorne had other ideas. Colonel, you do not have authority over corporate vessels. Thorne Industries is initiating nuclear option protocols. Nuclear option. Mitchell felt his blood run cold. What is she talking about? Riona grabbed his arm. What are nuclear options? Before Mitchell could answer, the displays in the heart tree showed missile launchers deploying from the corporate fleet. Not conventional weapons, but nuclear warheads, planet crackers designed to shatter moons for easier resource extraction. Elder Valey shouted, "They're targeting the heart trees with weapons of mass destruction." I see. Elder Nisara's voice was calm, but Mitchell could hear the finality in it. Then, they have forced our hand completely. She stood her ancient form, suddenly radiating power that seemed to flow through the heart tree itself. Implement the final protocol. All trees, all settlements, all secrets. Let them inherit a dead moon, rather than an enslaved one. Wait, Mitchell stepped forward. Elder, please, there has to be another way. The Nest Prize speaks from the heart, but not from wisdom. They come with world-killing weapons. There is no negotiation with such beings. What about Colonel Vance? He's trying to stop this. What about Dr. Chen and the other scientists? They just want to learn. They are not the ones with the power to decide, Riona said sadly. The one called Thorn commands the weapons. Mitchell realized that everything he had found on this moon, the beauty, the wisdom, the possibility of partnership between species, was about to be destroyed by human greed and alien pride in equal measure. Let me talk to them, he pleaded. Let me try one more time. Elder Nisara studied him with those ancient wise eyes. The Nest Prize would speak for both our peoples. I would try to save both our peoples. She nodded slowly. Very well. You have until the weapons fire to find a third option. But understand, if those nuclear weapons launch toward any heart tree, the final protocol will trigger automatically. The trees will not allow themselves to be taken alive. Mitchell moved to the communication console, his hands shaking as he activated the connection to the human fleet. This is Mitchell Rain to all human vessels. I'm speaking from inside the Ryanese command center. Colonel Vance's voice came through immediately. Rain, report your status. Are you being held hostage? No, sir. I'm here by choice. Colonel Director Thorne, everyone listening, you need to understand what's about to happen. Director Thorne's voice interrupted. Mr. Rain, you've clearly developed Stockholm Syndrome during your captivity. Stand aside and let the professionals handle this situation. Director Thorne, if you fire those weapons, you'll get nothing. The Ryanese have something called the Final Protocol. If threatened with annihilation, they'll destroy everything rather than let it be taken. Every tree, every piece of technology, every secret gone. You're bluffing. I'm trying to save everyone, Colonel Vance. You've seen their defensive capabilities. They can neutralize our technology without harming us. Why would you risk nuclear war when they're still offering trade and cooperation? Colonel Vance's voice carried the strain of a man caught between military orders and moral conscience. Rain, my orders are to secure this moon for human expansion. The corporate interests have legal priority in resource exploitation. And what about the legal rights of the people who live here? The Ryanese have been here for thousands of years. Director Thorne laughed harshly. Legal rights? Mr. Rain, these creatures aren't human. They have no legal status under colonial law. Then maybe the law is wrong. The communication channel fell silent for a moment. Then Colonel Vance spoke again, his voice carefully controlled. Rain, is there a way to verify this final protocol claim? Some way to demonstrate that mutually assured destruction is actually on the table? Mitchell looked at Elder Nisara, who nodded slowly. Colonel, I'm going to have them show you something. Sensor scans of the northern ice cap, coordinates to follow. At Elder Nisara's command, the heart trees demonstrated a small-scale version of the final protocol. In the northern wastes, a small grove of infant trees suddenly blazed with incredible energy, their life force releasing in a controlled explosion that lit up the night sky. When the light faded, nothing remained but a perfectly smooth crater where the grove had been. My God, Dr. Chen's voice whispered through the channel. That was a demonstration, Mitchell said shakily. A tiny fraction of what would happen if all 17 mature heart trees activated the final protocol simultaneously. The energy release would crack this moon in half. "They're bluffing," Director Thorne insisted, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. "Ms. Thorne," Colonel Vance said formally, "I'm countermanding the nuclear strike order. This situation requires diplomatic resolution." "You don't have the authority." "I have the authority to prevent the total destruction of an entire alien civilization for the sake of corporate profits." "Mr. Rain, tell the Ryanese leaders we're suspending all hostile actions pending negotiation." Mitchell felt a surge of hope, but Elder Nisara's expression remained grave. "The weapons are still deployed, Nest Prize. Words are whined until actions match them." Elder Nisara acknowledges your statement, Colonel, but points out that the nuclear weapons are still armed and targeted. She needs to see actual stand-down before any negotiations can begin. A long pause. Then Colonel Vance's voice returned heavy with decision. "All vessels, this is Fleet Command. Stand down nuclear weapons. Repeat, stand down all nuclear weapons and return them to storage position." "Colonel, you are exceeding your authority," Director Thorne protested. "Ms. Thorne, you are exceeding yours. These people have offered trade and cooperation from the beginning. Your insistence on forced acquisition has nearly led to the destruction of everything you seek to gain." As they watched on their displays, the human fleet began to power down weapon systems and withdraw from aggressive positions. The nuclear weapons were returned to storage, and the corporate assault vessels retreated to holding positions. Elder Nisara let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for ages. "Cancel final protocol activation," she commanded. "Maintain second protocol defensive positions until further notice." Across the moon, the heart trees stepped back from the brink of suicide. The energy that had been building for ultimate destruction was redirected to defensive systems holding pattern, but no longer seeking to annihilate everything rather than surrender it. "Colonel Vance, the Ryanese have stepped back from their final option," Mitchell reported. "They're willing to negotiate." "Good. Mr. Rain, I'm promoting you to official liaison between our peoples. Dr. Chen will head the scientific delegation. Can the Ryanese representatives meet us at a neutral location?" Elder Nisara spoke to the heart tree, and the walls showed a location. A valley between the main heart tree and the human base where the trees could quickly grow a meeting place. "They can create a neutral meeting hall in 4 hours, Mitchell said. "But Elder Nisara wants to be clear. This is negotiation about cooperation, not capitulation." "Understood. And Mr. Rain, for the record, your actions today prevented a catastrophe that would have haunted both our species forever." As the communication channel closed, Mitchell felt exhaustion wash over him. They had pulled back from the brink, but the fundamental conflicts remained unresolved. "Will they honor the negotiations?" Riona asked. "Colonel Vance will. The scientists will. Director Thorne." Mitchell shook his head. "She'll look for another angle, another way to get what she wants." "Then we must be prepared for that as well," Elder Nisara said. "But for now, we have bought time. Time to build understanding, to find a path forward that neither destroys nor enslaves." The negotiation hall that grew in the valley over the next 4 hours was a masterpiece of biological architecture. The heart trees crafted a structure that was clearly neutral, beautiful, but not overwhelmingly alien, comfortable for humans, while still demonstrating Ryanese capabilities. Inside, organic furniture configured itself for both human and Ryanese physiology, while environmental controls maintained perfect comfort for both species. Most importantly, translation interfaces were built into the very walls, ensuring that every nuance of the discussions would be accurately conveyed. The human delegation arrived in force, Colonel Vance, leading the military contingent, Dr. Chen, heading a team of scientists, and unfortunately, Director Thorne, bringing her own team of lawyers and corporate specialists. The Ryanese delegation matched them in composition, Elder Nisara, and the Council of Matrons Scientific Advisors, and Veli representing those who favored stronger defensive measures. Mitchell found himself in the unique position of sitting between the two groups, literally and figuratively bridging two worlds. Let me state clearly at the outset. Elder Nisara began, "We are here to discuss cooperation between equals, not the terms of our surrender." And let me state equally clearly, Director Thorne replied, that Galactic Biosolutions has significant legal and financial interests in the resources of this system. Any agreements must acknowledge existing claims. Colonel Vance intervened before the discussion could derail immediately. Both sides have demonstrated their capabilities today. Both sides have also shown that direct conflict would be catastrophic for everyone involved. Perhaps we can find common ground. The common ground, Matron Kira said diplomatically, is our mutual interest in knowledge and prosperity. You seek our biotechnology, and we can provide it. But we seek guarantees of our continued existence as a free people. Dr. Chen leaned forward eagerly. The applications for your biotechnology are limitless. Medical breakthroughs, environmental restoration, sustainable manufacturing, we could solve problems that have plagued humanity for centuries. And we have seen problems with your current approaches that our methods could easily address, one of the Ryanese scientists added. Your atmospheric processes on colony worlds, your resource extraction methods, your waste management all could be revolutionized through biotechnical partnership. Partnership implies shared control, Director Thorne said bluntly. Galactic Biosolutions cannot accept arrangements where proprietary technologies remain under alien control. And the Ryanese cannot accept arrangements where their knowledge is used for purposes they do not approve of. Elder Nisara replied equally bluntly. Mitchell could see the negotiation hitting the same fundamental roadblock that had led to the near disaster earlier. The humans wanted control. The Ryanese wanted autonomy, and neither side was willing to compromise on that basic principle. What if we approach this differently, he suggested. Instead of trying to transfer technology from one side to the other, what if we created joint programs, human and Ryanese scientists working together on specific projects? Dr. Chen's eyes lit up. Collaborative research stations. We could establish joint facilities where both species work together on projects of mutual interest. The Ryanese could maintain control over their core technologies while still sharing knowledge about their applications, Colonel Vance added. And humans could contribute our own technological advances, space travel computer systems, manufacturing techniques that complement rather than replace biotechnology, Mitchell continued. Director Thorne looked skeptical. Joint ventures are complex to manage and difficult to monetize. My corporation needs clear ownership structures. Perhaps, Elder Nisara said slowly, ownership is the wrong concept entirely. What if we thought in terms of fostering? Fostering, you have seen how we nurture the heart trees. We do not own them, they are not property. But we tend them, guide them, help them grow to their full potential. In return, they provide for us, shelter us, partner with us. Riona spoke up. The Nest Prize understands this relationship. He has lived within our fostering system. Symbiosis, Dr. Chen breathed. True biological symbiosis extended to interspecies cooperation. It could work, Colonel Vance said thoughtfully. Instead of exploitation cultivation. Instead of ownership partnership. Director Thorne shook her head. My board will never accept agreements based on philosophical concepts like fostering. We need concrete, legally binding contracts with clear profit structures. Then, perhaps, Bailey said quietly, your corporation is not the right partner for such ventures. I beg your pardon. You have demonstrated that you view our people as resources to be harvested. Any partnership with such an entity would eventually lead to conflict. Bailey turned to Colonel Vance and Dr. Chen. However, your government and scientific communities have shown interest in true cooperation. Perhaps agreements could be made with them instead. Director Thorne's face flushed with anger. You cannot simply ignore established corporate rights. What established rights? Mitchell asked. You keep talking about rights to this moon, but the Ryanese have been here for thousands of years. By what law do you claim authority over their world? Colonial law clearly states. Colonial law written by humans for humans about empty worlds, Elder Nisara interrupted. This world was never empty. The argument might have continued, but Colonel Vance raised his hand for silence. I think we're approaching this from the wrong angle, he said diplomatically. Instead of debating who has what rights, why don't we focus on what each side can offer the other? Over the next several hours, the negotiations took on a more productive tone. Lists were made of human needs that Ryanese biotechnology could address, and Ryanese interests that human spacefaring capabilities could serve. The picture that emerged was compelling. The Ryanese could provide solutions to humanity's environmental and sustainability challenges, while humans could offer the Ryanese access to the wider galaxy new worlds, to explore new partners to learn from protection from other species who might prove less cooperative than humans. The heart trees have always dreamed of the stars, one of the Ryanese scientists admitted. Our technology is focused inward on partnership with living systems. But your ability to travel between worlds to carry life to new environments, this opens possibilities we had never imagined. And your biotechnology could make our colonies truly sustainable, Dr. Chen added excitedly. Instead of terraforming worlds to suit our needs, we could adapt to work with existing ecosystems. Even Director Thorne seemed to be coming around as the economic potential became clear. The licensing potential alone would be enormous. If we could establish exclusive distribution rights for Ryanese biotechnology in human space. Not exclusive, Elder Nisara said firmly, but preferential perhaps in return for preferential access to the wider galaxy. As the formal negotiations continued, Mitchell found himself in quiet conversation with Riona during a break. Do you think it will work? She asked. This partnership they're trying to build. I think it has a chance, Mitchell replied. But it will require constant work, constant vigilance to prevent it from becoming exploitation. And you, Nest Prize, what is your place in this new relationship between our peoples? Mitchell considered the question. I understand both sides now. I've lived with your people, learned your ways. But I'm still human, still connected to my own species. Maybe that makes me useful as a bridge. Or maybe it makes you homeless, Riona said gently. Maybe. But I think home is what you make it. And I've found something here worth building a home around. Riona's expression softened. The bondmate speaks wisdom. The negotiations concluded 3 days later, with a preliminary agreement that would have seemed impossible when the human fleet first arrived. A joint scientific council would be established with equal representation from both species. Research stations would be built where human and Ryanese scientists could work together on projects of mutual benefit. The Ryanese would provide biotechnical solutions to human environmental and sustainability challenges, while humans would provide the Ryanese with access to space travel and protection in the wider galaxy. Most importantly, Viral 9 would be recognized as a sovereign Ryanese world, with humans welcome only as invited guests and partners. Director Thorne managed to salvage some corporate involvement through exclusive distribution agreements for certain biotechnologies in human space, though under strict Ryanese oversight. It's not perfect, Colonel Vance admitted to Mitchell, as the agreements were being finalized. There will be conflicts, misunderstandings, people on both sides who oppose the partnership. But it's a beginning, Mitchell replied, and that's more than we had a week ago. What about you, Rain? The brass back on Earth is interested in your insights. There's talk of making you the first official human ambassador to an alien species. Mitchell glanced toward where Riona was speaking with Elder Nisara, her white fur gleaming in the light of the bioluminescent ceiling. I appreciate the offer, sir, but I think my value is in staying here, helping to make sure this partnership actually works day by day. Colonel Vance followed his gaze and smiled slightly. Ah, I see. Well, you certainly have unique qualifications for the job. The formal signing ceremony took place at the heart tree itself, in a grand chamber that the tree had grown specifically for the occasion. Representatives from both species put their names to documents, written in both human script and Ryanese bioink, that bound itself to the very structure of the agreement. As the ceremony concluded, and the human delegation prepared to return to their fleet, Mitchell realized that his crash landing on Viral 9 had led to something he could never have imagined: the first true partnership between humanity and an alien species. First liaison, Mitchell Rain. Elder Nisara addressed him formally, using his new title. The heart trees sing of hope tonight. Your presence here has led to possibilities none of us foresaw. I just tried to help people understand each other, Mitchell replied. And in doing so, you have changed the course of both our civilizations. As the human ships departed, leaving behind the first permanent interspecies embassy in human history, Mitchell stood with Riona on the platform, where he had first seen the human base camp. Now, it was being converted into the joint research facility, with biotechnical growth already beginning to integrate with human construction. Are you satisfied, Nest Prize? Riona asked. I'm hopeful, Mitchell replied. And I'm home. She leaned against him, her warmth a comfort in the cold air of Viral 9. The bond endures and grows. Above them, the stars shone down on a moon where two species had chosen understanding over fear, cooperation over conquest. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, misunderstandings, people on both sides who opposed the partnership. But tonight, as the bioluminescent patterns of the heart tree pulsed in harmony with the artificial lights of the human research station, Mitchell allowed himself to believe that they had truly found something worth preserving. The fluffy alien Beastwoman, who had rescued him from the ice, had given him far more than his life back. She had given him a purpose, a home, and a future where the vast differences between species could become bridges instead of walls. And as they stood together beneath the stars of Viral 9, Mitchell knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, human and Ryanese partners, in the truest sense of the word. The heart tree pulsed once more, as if sealing the promise of their bond, and the first chapter of interspecies cooperation began in earnest. From a crash landing and a desperate rescue had grown something unprecedented in human history, a true partnership with an alien species built on mutual respect, understanding, and hope for a shared future among the stars. Mitchell Rain, once a stranded pilot, now found himself at the center of the most important diplomatic relationship in human history. And he owed it all to a fluffy alien Beastwoman who had called him her Nest Prize and taught him what it really meant to belong somewhere. In the growing light of dawn on Viral 9, as bioarchitecture and human technology began their first tentative mergers around them, Mitchell and Riona watched the birth of a new Age 1, where the barriers between species could be bridges, and where home was what you chose to build with those you loved. The heart trees sang of new growth, new possibilities, and new bonds forming between the children of two worlds. And in their ancient wisdom, they knew that this was only the beginning.